What? Are you blind? That ball was on the line, pal! Oh, hello, kiddies. I was just warming up for the Wimbledon tennis tournament. Normally, I love a bit of stiff competition, but this guy is driving me nuts. Still, the match isn't over yet. We're playing Beast 2 out of 3. Which brings to mind the man in tonight's tale. He's about to play a little die breaker of his own in a sickening haxhibition I call Kidnapper.
It's funny the effect a baby can have on people. Not ha-ha funny, but funny. One time the vicar at my church said that children are God's opinion that the world should go on. I don't know if I agree with him or not. I guess deep down I always thought he stole that off a t-shirt. Still, it's funny the effect a child can have. Hello? Hello there? Hello? Cute. You a boy or a girl?
It's a boy.
My girlfriend had a baby last year. I mean, there are things you never think about when a baby comes along. Until it's too late, that is. You have to feed them, clothe them, and keep them healthy. Hello, little fella. It's a lot of work, and expensive too. I mean, you can't believe it.
I'll take him now, thank you.
Back to mummy. Back to mummy. Babies can put a real strain on a relationship, even the strongest. Believe me, I know firsthand. My girlfriend and I, we're no different than any other couple. When I first met her, she was pregnant and homeless. It was Christmas time and nobody'd come in for days except to use the toilet. By the way, my name's Danny Skeggs, just like it says on my name tag.
Hello?
I'm sorry, the toilets are for employees only.
I don't want to use your loo. I just wanted to do a bit of business with you.
Oh, right. Sorry. Well, let's have a look.
Could you tell me what this is worth?
Oh, family heirloom.
It's my grandmother's. It's all right. How much?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'll have to look it up. Stay right there. Miss? Miss?
What happened?
I don't know. You passed out. Do you want me to get you an ambulance?
No. No ambulances.
You sure? Perhaps you should see a doctor.
Look, can you just tell me how much for the bracelet?
Well, it's worth about £350, but, I can only afford to give you 75. Should probably hang on to it.
I can't. I need the money.
It belonged to your grandmother.
Look, I'll just take the £75, OK?
Sit here. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm sorry. Sorry, people, they don't come back here much.
It's OK. She's pretty.
Don't. Look, have you got somewhere to live?
Look, if you're not willing to give me
You
the
can
money...
stay with me.
What? No.
At least until the baby's born. It's an option.
That's very nice of you. But I couldn't. I don't even know you.
Not much to know. I own this shop. I live alone. Besides, you could keep your grandmother's bracelet. And...
And what?
it's Christmas. No one should be alone at Christmas. I just want to help.
Are you lonely, Danny?
Danny. No one calls me that anymore. I like it. Yes, I am.
Me too. Look, Danny, I'm going to be really honest with you. This baby's father hurt me really badly. And I'm not looking for anyone to replace him. What I need is a friend.
Right. I understand. Friends. Teresa was wonderful. As the months passed by, I realised that for the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to be in love. It didn't matter that she was pregnant with another bloke's baby, or that we didn't, you know, I couldn't have cared less. All that mattered was her happiness. And he just went splat.
That never happened. You're making it up. No one's daft enough to dry a wet hamster in a microwave oven.
It happened to a friend of a sister, of one of my customers. It's true, I swear it.
What do you know?
I know this. I really like having you here, Teresa. You can stay here as long as you want. You and the baby. I mean that.
I appreciate that.
Oh, I love you.
I'll clear the dishes.
That look she'd given me clinched it. She was in love with me too, in a big way. It didn't matter how we started. We were together now, and everything was perfect. Me, Teresa, and the baby. I thought you said we were going to the cinema tonight.
I can't, not with his tummy hurting. Why don't you go by yourself?
Because I went by my bloody self last time. I want to go with you like we used to.
Oh, grow up, Daniel.
Maybe he wouldn't be crying all the time if he didn't have that bloody great stupid birthmark on his arse.
Fuck you!
I think it was obvious. I wasn't angry for me, I was angry for Teresa. That baby, Mr. Needy, was draining the life out of her. He always had to be the centre of attention. It just wasn't healthy. For her own good and for the good of our relationship, something had to be done.
I'm sorry about last night.
It's all right. I think all our problems are just temporary.
I always wanted to do mine. Did you?
Do you want a hot dog?
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be lovely. Are you warm? Are you happy?
Stop it, Bernard. Don't go so high, you ruined my pacing.
I warned you, but you had to go ahead and do it anyway, didn't you?
Oh, God. Yeah.
I always end my act with it. It's my pièce de résistance. But you just couldn't leave well enough alone.
Oh, you're jealous.
The box within the box within the box has always been my illusion. Mine.
Not anymore. I do it better.
You badass bitch. Chill. I told you. Don't criticize me.
Stop it, you bastard, or I'll call the police!
Everything had gone as planned. We were free.
Must be something you could do.
Look, I'd give up a month's pay if I could hand you that baby tonight. We're going to do everything we can. The birthmark helps, but if we could just have a better description of the guy.
I told you I couldn't see him. What do you want from me?
Teresa, come on now. You did everything you could. We both did.
Why did they take my baby?
Here, give her these. They'll make her sleep, give you a chance to rest.
Thank you.
For what it's worth, I've got 3 of my own. If I ever caught someone looking funny at one of them, I'd kill the bastard faster than he could scream police brutality. Look, Mr. Skeggs, I have to level with you. Over 100 babies turn up missing in this country every year. Most are what we call custody snatches. A few are grabbed by the emotionally disturbed. Then there's the black market. The rest...
So you're telling me the odds aren't good?
I'm telling you to prepare yourself. If this doesn't work out, it's going to be a long road back.
I want my baby. I want my baby back.
Don't worry.
Please, God, give me back my baby.
We'll get him back.
Danny.
Yeah?
Will you sit with me? Please?
Yeah, sure. Remember, no matter what happens, you still got me. I'll still be here. It'll be like the old days. Better even. We can have our own baby if you want. I love you.
Don't. Stop it. Danny, stop it.
I want to show you.
Danny, stop it. Stop me. Stop me. Don't you understand? I don't want you. I want my baby.
Teresa needed a hero. If I could return the baby to her, she'd have to love me.
You what? Get the fuck out of here.
I want my baby back.
You can't have him back. He's gone.
What do you mean? You only picked him up the other day.
Yeah, and he's already been placed, you monkey. Do you have any idea what a white newborn baby is worth?
Yeah. Exactly what you paid me. £2,000.
10 times that idiot. I know doctors and lawyers who queue up round the block for a placement like him. That kid was signed, sealed and delivered in under 2 hours.
Now, look, you get my baby back, or I'll have the police in here so fast your head will spin.
OK, sit down. You made your point.
Just get me my baby back.
Snaps. Meet Daniel Skeggs.
How's it hanging, Skeggs?
All right, I suppose.
Mr. Skeggs here was just telling me he wanted his baby back. He said if we don't, he's gonna call the police.
Sounds pretty grim.
I'm desperate. My girlfriend.
We paid you good money for the kid. That makes you an accessory to kidnapping. The police wouldn't like that much.
They wouldn't have to know.
You're still not getting it, Skeggs.
Like this! If I ever see you again, if I ever even hear your name, you are a dead man.
Now, get him out of here.
La 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 la
Teresa? Teresa?
Shh, Danny. Can't you see he's asleep? Mummy's little baby was hiding in the rubbish behind the flats, weren't you? Yes, you.
No! No! No!
I'll take him now.
Sorry, what did you say?
My baby. Please give him to me.
Holding the baby suddenly got me thinking. I can make Teresa better and be her hero. All babies look alike. They all eat, sleep and cry. What's the difference? If you ask me, one baby's as good as another.
Thank you. No! My baby! My baby! My baby!
Someone help!
It's all right.
Ross was right about you, mate. He had a feeling you'd try something.
There he is! Let's get on! Get him! Come on!
Give me that!
Get the baby away! Let me back here! On the table! Somebody take him away!
It was Teresa's baby. My baby. But there was nothing I could do about it now. It's funny the effect a baby can have on people.
Poor Daniel. I bet he never thought he'd get such a kick from falling in love. At least in the end, he did the right thing. As for me, kiddies, I've got to get back to my game. I've been on quite a winning streak. Now that's what I call a service break. Greetings, Hackriculture fans. I'll be with you in a moment. I've just got to finish with the artichokes. Come on, Artie, die already. Phew. Now, a little water and some fertilizer. And before you know it, I'll be harvesting my own little field of screams. You didn't know your pal, the Crypt Keeper, had a green thumb, did you? Well, I do. And the rest of me is pretty damn moldy, too. Which brings to mind tonight's tale. It's about a scientist who's a bit of a scarecropper himself. I call this one Report from the Grave.
always get a strange feeling when I go into the cemetery. There's an energy about these places. Can't you feel it?
At this point, all I can feel is the sharp corner of a disc drive digging into my back.
It doesn't sound like you, Elliot.
Dead is dead as far as I'm concerned. All I want to do is hook a rotting brain to my machine and see if I can't wrench some memories from its decaying synapse.
How can you be into quantum theory and not be in touch with the universe? At some point, all physics breaks down into metaphysics. Look at the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. The Big Bang, boundary conditions in the universe. It's all very zen. Don't you believe in anything but science?
Of course. Loyalty and trust.
Be careful with that, Ariane. Can't you do anything?
All right. What is it? What's going on?
Nothing. Should we just get on with it?
Elliot, I didn't steal your documents.
Well, someone did. My work is being stolen. Documents from the experiments are missing from my files.
Maybe you mislaid them.
I didn't mislay them, Ariane. That work is my blood. I depend on that work to get grants. It's my future, and someone is stealing it from me.
Elliot, look at me. I love you. How could you possibly think I'd do anything to hurt you? After all, what do I care about patents and circuitry? You'll always have my heart in your hands. Take care of it.
Look, I have to get half this gear back to the Medside building before dawn.
Right. You better get on with it. Who's our lucky victim?
Valdemir Timrak.
Great name. Bet he had plenty of friends.
Valdemir Timrak. Number 13 in the world-class Psychos trading card set. Huh? 26 certified kills, 19 women, 7 men. Timrak was a renowned mesmerist who apparently hypnotized his victims with a single stare. Under his control, they were made to commit terrible and depraved acts before he murdered them and bathed in their blood.
Very interesting. Good night, Elliot. I'm not doing this.
Don't be so dramatic. That's just bullshit they put on these cards so that people will buy them.
Look, you said he wrote a book. Couldn't you just read it?
Well, I would if I could get hold of it. Anyway, that's not the point. Point is, my machine. This man had tremendous mental powers. Maybe something of that mind remains.
Couldn't you just go to Paris and dig up Jim Morrison instead?
Ariane.
Oh, Valdemir here is in amazing shape.
I'm very happy for him.
Stop that.
What did they do to him?
Well, after his death, Tim Rack's supplicants stole his body from the morgue and embalmed it in accordance with some papers that he left behind. His procedure was intended to super-preserve his body until he returned from the grave to reclaim it. Well, so much for the afterlife, eh, Ariane?
Anything?
Something. It's faint, though. It's like it needs more power. I don't get it. It should be getting plenty of juice. Ah.
Miss Finch, we're very interested in the Quinlan experiments you sent us.
Well, Ariane, you want to hear something? Hear this.
Dear Mr. Quinlan, we have examined your experiments and post-mortem memory recovery, as submitted by Ms. Ariane Finch, and are extremely pleased to inform you that you are the recipient of our annual £100,000 grant. As you may know, we grant only 3 of these.
Circuit.
Elliot. What is this?
Something I need.
What you need is to go home.
Home? Yes. Wonderful. What about the book? Malcolm, did you find the book?
I'm still looking for it. Elliot, I think you should leave this alone.
No, I know what happened now, Malcolm. Ariane saw, heard what no one is meant to hear. For an instant, in time, that the world of the living and the world of the dead collided, and it killed her. I have to know what it was. I have to help her. She needs me.
Ariane is dead, Elliot. No one can bring her back. You have to let her go. It wasn't your fault.
Died March 12th. She'll do fine.
My heart's faded.
What is it?
I want to remember everything about you.
every line on your face so that I'll never forget.
Why would you forget?
What is this? I'm not real. I can feel it. I'm not really here.
You are real. You're here with me.
No, Elliot. I'm not. I'm an illusion. A memory. Like the flickering image on a movie screen. You willed me here. You reached down into death and you pulled me out. But I can't stay with you.
Yes. Yes, you can. As long as that machine is on, you can be here with me.
Someday the machine will fail and I'll have to go back.
What did you hear that night?
Dark. Pain. The pain of the dead. So strong, the screams. They were his dead. Timrak. The flesh of the dead can be torn 1,000 times. And now I'm his.
You'll never go back to him, I swear it. What is it?
He's coming.
The machine!
How can I destroy him?
I don't know.
Think, there must be a way.
He's not alive. How can you kill the dead? The machine. It must be shut down.
I can't. That would send you both back.
You don't have a choice.
What if I modify the circuit that you sent me?
I didn't send it, Elliot.
What? You were in the room with the window.
No, Elliot, he must have sent it. You saw what he wanted you to see.
But the circuit.
He's doing. And if you change it, this thing will grow so monstrous. It'll open a hole to death that can never be closed. You can't let him win, Elliot. You must destroy the machine. He used you, Elliot. He knew that the only way you would build that machine is if he sent me back to you.
No!
Don't allow him to regain his body, Elliot. Stop him!
Circuit. I can't remember the circuit.
Elliot? What are you doing?
I can't remember it. I've tried, but it's gone, and I can't help it. She's calling me, and I can't help it.
Come on. You're the one who needs help.
Malcolm, thank you.
Sleep well, my friend. I'll call on you in the morning. Oh, I finally found a copy of this. It was quite expensive. The collector said... I'll just leave it here. Elliot's diary. so that I'm sure that Sergeant Baker will be able to help you.
Mr. Dietz, you better come with me. It's down here.
Have you read this?
Oh, mad as they come. Grave robbing, ghosts. It's a lot of nonsense, isn't it?
Can I speak to him?
You can, but I'm afraid he won't be doing a lot of talking back.
Elliot.
Poor bastard.
Sir, we found something. I don't know if it's important.
Well, what is it?
It's on the window, sir. There's something written in the dew.
Yes?
Well, it's just that it's on the outside, sir. And all the windows on the second floor are painted shut. She came back then. They're off fighting demons now.
Poor Elliot. Thought his field was physics. Turned out it was diology. And that's not the worst of it. Elliot only read the first part of Timrak's book, where he tied up Ariane. If Elliot had read a little further, he would have seen Timrak's chapter 2. I've got to get back to my planting. I've already sown the scarrots and the turnips, which means I've got just one more crop to put in. Squash! Squash!
The night had that kind of chill that seeped into the bones, the sort that whispered promises of things unseen. Street lights flickered intermittently along Maple Avenue, casting elongated shadows across the slick asphalt. In a small, dimly lit neighborhood, the homes huddled together as if to ward off the darkness that pressed from beyond the trees. Among them, an unremarkable house with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox stood silently. It was the kind of house you passed and forgot, but tonight it was about to host a tale that would make even the most hardened hearts quicken with unease. Inside, a young boy named Jamie slept fitfully, unaware of the events that would soon shatter the fragile peace of his childhood. The boy's room was a modest one, decorated with a motley assortment of action figures and half-finished drawings pinned haphazardly to the walls. A nightlight, shaped like a small lighthouse, cast a pale glow that barely reached the corners, leaving them to brood in shadow. Jamie stirred in his bed, murmuring something unintelligible as if sensing a presence he could not see. Outside, a man lingered in the shadows, moving with calculated patience. He was neither the sort to hurry nor the sort to falter. His movements were deliberate, measured, almost ritualistic. The street was deserted, save for the occasional car that passed by, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The man's eyes scanned the windows, pausing at the one that revealed Jamie's restless form. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He had waited for this night, for the perfect opportunity, and he intended to seize it without hesitation. Inside the house, Jamie's mother, Ellen, stirred in her own bed. She had been half awake for some time, feeling a sense of unease that she could neither name nor shake. Mothers often have this intuition, a thread that tugs at the subconscious when danger lurks near. Ellen had experienced that tug tonight, a subtle tightening in her chest that made her glance toward her son's room. Perhaps it was the way the night felt heavier than usual, or the whisper of wind that seemed to carry more than just cold air. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, convincing herself it was nothing. After all, the world had to go on. The man outside moved closer, each step silent, absorbing the darkness like a shadow absorbing light. He carried with him a nondescript bag, the kind one might mistake for carrying mundane tools or gym clothes. Yet inside, it held instruments of meticulous planning, ropes, masks, and a calm that only someone with a singular purpose could exude. The neighborhood, familiar and predictable, was now a stage for his malevolent choreography. Jamie twitched in his sleep, a hand flailing slightly as if reaching for something intangible. The man paused, observing, savoring the moment. In his mind, he was a predator, not bound by the law or morality, only by the rules he set for himself. Tonight, he would take what he sought, and the world would be none the wiser until it was too late. A car passed by silently, its headlights briefly illuminating the man's figure before disappearing into the night. He melted back into the shadows, patient as a spider waiting for the fly to wander too close. Minutes stretched, each one dragging with a tension that could be felt in the very air. The house seemed to exhale slowly, unaware of the danger pressing against its walls, its doors, its very soul. Inside, Jamie murmured again, words forming half-coherent sentences that spoke of fear and longing intertwined. His dreams had shifted into a darker landscape, a world where someone was reaching for him, where shadows moved with intent. Children often dream vividly, and some dreams carry premonitions, warnings the adult mind dismisses as mere fancy. But tonight, Jamie's dream was not entirely a dream. Something outside was stirring in concert with his subconscious, a chilling synchronicity that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, even in sleep. The man approached the back door, careful not to make a sound. He paused to inspect the lock, a minor obstacle that seemed almost laughable to someone so meticulous. With the precision of a seasoned hand, he manipulated the mechanism, and a soft click echoed faintly in the stillness. He pushed the door open just enough to slip through, the darkness swallowing him whole as if it had welcomed an old friend. Ellen, still half asleep, heard nothing, though instinct prickled at her. The creak of a hinge, the subtle shifting of weight on a wooden floor, it all passed unnoticed to her dreaming mind. She turned, hugging the covers closer, unaware that danger had already crossed the threshold, stepping into the very home she had always deemed safe. Jamie's eyes fluttered open as a shadow loomed over him. At first, he thought it was a trick of the nightlight, a fleeting shape born of half-dreams and imagination, but the shadow did not vanish. It stretched, contorted, and finally resolved into a figure, tall, silent, masked. Fear surged through Jamie, a paralyzing wave that gripped his chest and made it hard to breathe. He tried to scream, but the sound caught in his throat, strangled before it could escape. The man moved quickly now, though his movements retained a methodical grace. He reached for Jamie with gloved hands, hands that had touched no one but the darkness before this night. The boy's small body trembled as the realization dawned. He was not dreaming. The air felt thicker, heavier, the room closing in with a presence that was palpably malevolent. Ellen awoke fully then, a scream forming on her lips as she realized what was happening. She lunged forward, but the man was prepared, a swiftness honed through countless rehearsals of the same scenario. A cloth, dampened with a chemical that dulled the senses, pressed against her face. Her struggles were brief, desperate, but ultimately futile. The man's eyes were cold, calculating. This was not the first time he had performed such an act, and certainly not the last he intended. Jamie struggled violently, tears streaming down his face, a soundless plea for help that the night swallowed whole. The man lifted him with ease, his grip firm, yet devoid of unnecessary force. He whispered nothing, for no words were necessary. The boy's terror sufficed as communication, a language understood by predator and prey alike. Each step toward the waiting car was measured, a march toward an unknown fate that the boy could neither comprehend nor resist. In the street, the night was indifferent. Trees swayed as if in silent witness, the wind carrying the distant bark of a dog that would never arrive in time. The car waited like a shadowy chariot, its engine silent, its presence almost spectral. The man slid Jamie inside, buckled him in, and merged with the night, a phantom dissolving into the darkness from whence he came. Inside the house, Ellen struggled against the lingering effects of the cloth, her mind racing in a frantic spiral. The room felt hollow, emptier than before, as if the very air had been stolen along with her son. Panic surged, sharp and unrelenting, a storm that left no room for reason. She fell to her knees, her hands clawing at the floor, at the bed, anywhere she might find a fragment of her boy. But the night had conspired with evil, and it had succeeded. The man drove with a calculated calm, weaving through the city streets with an intimate knowledge of the roads. His mind was occupied not by guilt or remorse, but by anticipation, the planning for what came next. Jamie, seated rigidly, eyes wide and unblinking, felt the rhythm of his own heart in violent contrast to the serene, practiced cadence of his captor. Fear was a tangible thing, and it coursed through every inch of the boy's small frame, a current that refused to be stilled. The journey took them away from the familiar, into districts that were sparsely populated, shadows longer and darker than any the boy had known. The man spoke in measured tones, though his words were not meant for comfort. Instead, they were exercises, ways to unnerve, to establish dominion over a small, fragile life now entirely under his control. Each syllable was deliberate, carefully chosen, a weapon as effective as any physical restraint. Hours passed in this tense, oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional sigh of the boy or the hum of the tires against asphalt. The man's face remained impassive, yet within that mask of calm simmered a hunger for power, control, and the meticulous satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. He had anticipated every variable, every possible interruption, and prepared contingencies for all. And yet, in the back of his mind, a tiny flicker of uncertainty lingered, a ghostly reminder that not all plans remain unbroken when the night conspires with the innocent. Finally, he arrived at a location that seemed pulled from another time, another world. The building was abandoned, windows shattered and graffiti sprawled across its walls like the remnants of forgotten nightmares. It was a perfect cage, a place where light and sound could be banished, and the boy would be utterly alone, but for the presence of his captor. The man guided Jamie inside, locking the door behind them, and the echo of the click resonated like the final note of a dirge. Jamie huddled in a corner, knees drawn to his chest, eyes darting to every shadow, every corner, every sound. His mind raced with questions that could never be answered and a terror that refused to abate. The man observed, noting the boy's every reaction, each shiver, each rapid inhale, cataloging them in a mental ledger that would inform the next step. The night was far from over, and the tale of darkness had only just begun. Outside, the wind whispered through broken windows, carrying with it the scent of decay, of forgotten secrets. The world beyond this derelict structure remained oblivious, the lives within it continuing in mundane normalcy. Yet inside, in that shadowed, hollow place, the story of terror, control, and fear was unfolding, each heartbeat of the boy echoing like a metronome in a symphony of dread. And as the night deepened, one truth became undeniable. The game had begun, and escape would be neither simple nor certain. The room was colder than Jamie expected, though it was the middle of summer. The walls, once perhaps white, were now layered in grime and shadow, each crack a scar of time and neglect. The air smelled of rust, mold, and the faint tang of chemicals, a smell that clung to his lungs with a suffocating persistence. He pressed himself against the far corner, hoping invisibility could be achieved by mere will. But the man did not need to search. He knew exactly where the boy would be, as though some preternatural instinct guided him, a predator in perfect harmony with his prey. "You're awake," the man said finally, his voice low and measured. It carried no malice in tone, yet each word dripped with unspoken threat. "Good. I prefer my subjects conscious, makes them more honest." Jamie's lips trembled, but no words formed. His throat felt constricted, as though even the simplest utterance would be swallowed by the darkness around him. His small hands shook uncontrollably. The man's shadow fell over him, taller, imposing, and suffocating, a presence that seemed almost inhuman in its patience and precision. "Listen," the man continued, kneeling to be at eye level with the boy, though the darkness still masked his features. "Tonight, nothing happens by accident. Every choice you make, every movement, is something I am watching." His hand reached out, brushing the boy's hair back with clinical detachment. "Do you understand?" Jamie nodded weakly, not out of comprehension, but from a primal understanding that resistance would be met with consequences too terrifying to imagine. His mind spun, desperate to recall any memory of escape, any trick or plan he had ever read about in books or movies. But fear is a cage of its own design, and tonight, Jamie's imagination felt impotent against the reality pressing down upon him. The man stood, his movements deliberate, and began inspecting the room. There were remnants of previous occupants, empty cans, old newspapers, and splintered furniture, but each item was catalogued quickly and efficiently, stored in his mind as if preparing for a psychological game. He paused at a broken window, peering through the darkness outside, as if to confirm that the world beyond was still ignorant of his activities. Jamie's eyes followed him, tracking every step, every gesture. He noticed how methodical the man was, how calm, almost eerie in his composure. The silence of the room pressed down, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the ceiling or the scrape of the man's shoes on the concrete floor. Each sound amplified the tension, making Jamie feel like his own heartbeat had become a drum marking the rhythm of his doom. Hours seemed to pass in a suspended, dreamlike haze. The boy did not sleep. His body was too alert, too consumed by fear. He tried to think of his mother, Ellen, hoping the memory would give him strength, but even that thought was bittersweet, tinged with a gnawing helplessness that he could not shake. The man occasionally circled him, silent as a shadow, observing and cataloging. Jamie felt like prey under an unblinking eye, every twitch and tremor noted, every thought guessed with uncanny accuracy. Finally, the man spoke again. "I'm going to make you comfortable," he said, setting down the bag he had carried. It opened with a soft zip, revealing blankets, food, and a few small items that might seem benign to an untrained eye. "Comfortable," he repeated, his tone oddly hollow, as though he was mocking the very idea. "But understand this, comfort does not mean safety." He laid a thin blanket over Jamie's shoulders, a gesture that might have seemed tender if not for the intent behind it. He set a small sandwich and bottle of water on the floor, within reach, and then stepped back. The boy's hunger gnawed at him, but fear constrained his appetite. Each bite was measured, each sip calculated, as if even the simplest act of nourishment could betray him to the man's observation. Night deepened, and shadows shifted with a life of their own. The building moaned under the weight of its age, and wind whispered through shattered windows like the murmurs of ghosts. Jamie's mind wandered, trying to make sense of what had happened. He thought of the warmth of his home, of Ellen's voice, of sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. Each memory was a knife, reminding him of everything stolen in one night. The man sat in the corner, watching. He did not speak for long stretches, merely observing the boy, letting silence do its work. Silence is a powerful instrument, and he wielded it expertly. Each moment stretched into eternity, the boy's sense of time dissolving into a continuous loop of fear and anticipation. Then came the questioning. It started innocuously enough, with the man asking about his family, his school, and friends. But Jamie quickly realized there was no ordinary curiosity here. The questions were designed to probe, to unsettle, to reveal vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Every hesitation, every stammer, was met with a quiet note of satisfaction from the man, a predator delighting in the knowledge that he had achieved dominance. Hours melted into an indistinguishable haze. Jamie's mind, desperate for distraction, began to imagine scenarios of escape. He considered running, hiding, even confronting the man directly, but each thought was met with the stark reality of the room. Concrete floors, boarded-up windows, doors reinforced with locks beyond his ability to pick. Every plan crumbled before it could form. Fear, he realized, was the strongest barrier, more unyielding than any physical restraint. The man eventually rose, moving toward a far wall where an old map hung, frayed at the edges. He traced lines with a gloved finger, plotting movements and contingencies as if the room itself was a chessboard and Jamie a piece to be maneuvered at will. The boy watched, heart pounding, understanding that his life had been reduced to something so clinical, so coldly strategic, that even thought itself seemed a luxury he could not afford. Night continued its slow march, bringing with it an oppressive quiet. Outside, the wind carried strange, mournful sounds that Jamie could not identify. Somewhere, perhaps a distant alley or a forgotten warehouse, dogs barked and sirens wailed, but it all felt distant, irrelevant. In this isolated cage, time seemed suspended, and the boy existed solely in the orbit of his captor's intent. Then the man spoke of the future. His words were soft, yet each carried the weight of inevitability. "You'll learn to follow rules," he said. "There's nothing to fear if you cooperate. Nothing at all. Resistance. Well, resistance only prolongs discomfort." He circled Jamie, hand hovering near his shoulder, but never quite touching, a constant reminder of the power he held. Jamie understood with a sick clarity that this was not a person to reason with. Every attempt to bargain, every plea for mercy would be met with silence or calculated action. He was entirely at the mercy of a mind that did not operate on morality, but on method, and the realization sank into him like ice water, leaving him shivering even under the thin blanket. Hours passed. The man dozed occasionally, though his eyes never fully closed. Jamie listened to the irregular rhythm of breathing, counting silently, trying to maintain some sense of order in a world that had been violently upended. He wondered how long it would be before morning, before Ellen would realize he was gone, before the police might come, before the fragile thread of reality snapped entirely. The room itself seemed to respond to the presence of menace. Shadows deepened, corners darkened further, and every sound, water dripping, wind moaning, a rat scurrying, felt amplified, a chorus accompanying the relentless tension. Jamie's small hands dug into the concrete floor, clawing at it as though he could dig a tunnel to freedom. But freedom was a distant, almost mythical concept in this place. As dawn began to hint at the horizon, faint light spilling through cracks, the man stirred with a deliberate sluggishness. "Rest now," he said softly, a cruel mimicry of kindness. Jamie understood that this rest was merely a lull, a temporary reprieve before the game resumed. The boy closed his eyes, if not in sleep, then in forced calm, trying to preserve what little energy and sanity remained. The morning brought no relief, only a continuation of the shadowed reality Jamie found himself in. The man's plans were already forming in his mind, steps and contingencies, always forward, always precise. The boy existed within a framework entirely of the man's making, and any deviation from it seemed unthinkable. He was caught in a web so meticulously spun that even his imagination struggled to escape. Outside, the world moved obliviously. Birds sang, the wind carried scents of coffee and fresh bread from the distant city, and life continued without pause. But inside the abandoned building, time had a different rhythm, one dictated by fear, control, and the relentless presence of the man who had stolen a child and transformed an ordinary night into a nightmare. And as the morning light crept, weak and pale, into the broken windows, Jamie knew that nothing about this day would be ordinary. Every sound, every shadow, every breath carried with it the echo of what had begun the night before. The story was far from over, and the boy, trembling and exhausted, realized with a hollow certainty that the darkness had many more chapters to write. The afternoon sun filtered weakly through the broken windows, painting pale stripes across the concrete floor. For Jamie, the light was almost alien, too stark, too revealing. Shadows retreated reluctantly into the corners, as if acknowledging the intrusion of reality into a place that thrived on darkness. His muscles ached from hours of tension, his joints stiff from being confined in that corner, yet he could not afford to relax. Every sound was amplified, every movement a potential threat. Even the rhythm of his own breathing seemed conspicuous under the watchful presence of the man. The man had been silent for the past hour, occupied with his meticulous inspection of the room. Every crack in the wall, every splintered piece of furniture, every discarded paper had received his attention. He had moved like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, each motion deliberate, each gesture charged with purpose. Jamie watched him, eyes wide, heart hammering, the only sound in his own mind the frantic drumbeat of terror and anticipation. Finally, the man approached, carrying a small metal box. It was nondescript, worn, with scratches that spoke of repeated handling. He set it down in front of Jamie, the lid clicking open to reveal an assortment of objects whose purpose Jamie could not guess. Keys, small tools, a length of rope coiled with precision, and a few items that looked personal. A photograph, partially torn, depicting a smiling family at a picnic. Jamie's heart twisted painfully at the sight, though he knew better than to react visibly. The man watched him closely, noting every micro-expression, every involuntary shiver. "You see," the man said, his tone soft but measured, "everything has a purpose. Nothing here is random. Do you understand?" Jamie swallowed hard. He nodded, words failing him. Fear had stripped his voice away, leaving only the language of compliance. "Good," the man replied, almost approvingly. "Because understanding is the first step. Cooperation makes things easier. Resistance only prolongs discomfort, and you have already experienced enough of that, haven't you?" The boy's hands trembled as he gripped the blanket around his shoulders. He did not answer. The man's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, not in anger, but in appraisal. He circled Jamie once more like a predator confirming the state of his prey, then sat back against the wall, opening a small notebook. He began writing, not at a frenetic pace, but deliberately, documenting observations, perhaps even constructing a psychological profile of his captive. Jamie's unease grew, the sense that he was not only trapped physically but catalogued mentally, a specimen in a twisted experiment. Time moved differently in that room. Minutes stretched into hours, and hours into a hazy blur where night and day became meaningless constructs. Jamie tried to distract himself, to recall memories that brought comfort, but they all seemed tainted by the shadow of his current predicament. He remembered the last morning with his mother, the way her hair smelled of shampoo and sunlight, the way she had kissed him goodbye as he left for school. That memory now seemed like a scene from a distant, inaccessible world, one he might never return to. The man finally spoke again, closing the notebook with a soft snap. "I imagine you have questions," he said. "Questions about why, about when, about what comes next. But those are not yet yours to answer. Your role, for now, is simple. Observe, listen, survive. Everything else comes later." Jamie's stomach twisted. He wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but he understood instinctively that such actions would serve only to deepen his peril. The man's eyes were like dark mirrors, reflecting a depth of calculation and cruelty that left no room for negotiation. The boy's fear was a tool, sharpened and wielded with precision. The man moved to a corner of the room where a small cot had been set up. He gestured for Jamie to sit, and after a tense pause, the boy obeyed. The cot was hard, unyielding, yet it provided some semblance of structure, a small anchor in a sea of chaos. The man handed him a thin blanket and a small pillow, gestures almost parental in appearance, but the intent behind them was unmistakably manipulative. Comfort, he knew, was a precursor to compliance. Jamie lay on the cot, curling inward, his thoughts racing. He imagined his mother's face, the soft timbre of her voice, the scent of home. Yet the reality around him was starkly different. Concrete walls, broken windows, the faint metallic scent of rust and dust. Every instinct screamed for him to escape, yet every practical thought reminded him of the futility. He was trapped, not just by the man, but by circumstance, geography, and the meticulous planning of a predator. Hours passed, and the man occasionally approached, observing, asking questions that seemed innocuous on the surface but carried an undercurrent of psychological probing. "Do you like school?" he asked at one point as Jamie sat tensely on the cot. Friends? Jamie answered softly, words barely audible. Each reply was scrutinized, analyzed, catalogued. The man nodded occasionally, as if confirming hypotheses, making notes mentally or in his notebook. This was not mere curiosity. It was preparation, an exercise in control and domination. The boys' small victories, like answering questions or remaining calm, were acknowledged subtly, almost like a teacher grading a student. But the stakes were life itself. At one point, the man moved to the window, peering out into the distance. "You'll learn," he said without turning, "that nothing here is as it seems. Appearances deceive, and understanding comes only when you accept your reality. This world, your world now, is dictated by rules. Rules I define." Jamie's mind struggled with the enormity of it. Reality had shifted. The familiar had been stripped away. The night before had been a rupture, an abrupt tearing of his life as he knew it. And now, in the harsh glare of this oppressive afternoon, he realized that his survival depended not on cleverness alone, but on understanding the mindset of the man who held him. The man returned to his notebook, scribbling occasionally, pausing to observe reactions. Jamie's every thought, every tremor, every heartbeat seemed to be under scrutiny. Fear was a currency, and he was paying with every ounce of his being. Yet, within this terror, a small ember of determination began to kindle. Escape, he realized, would not be spontaneous. It would require strategy, patience, and perhaps a momentary lapse in the man's own vigilance. The room grew quiet as the afternoon waned, shadows deepening once again. Jamie's thoughts became sharper, more deliberate. He memorized every detail: the cracks in the walls, the placement of furniture, the weight and pace of the man's movements. Each observation was a potential key, a piece of a puzzle that could one day become the path to freedom. The man finally stood, stretching slowly, almost lazily. "Rest for now," he said again, his tone almost gentle, but Jamie understood the pretense for what it was: a tactic to lull him into compliance, a psychological maneuver that left him simultaneously grateful and terrified. The boy nodded, curling back into himself on the cot, muscles tense, eyes open, listening to every sound. Outside, the wind carried strange scents, the city's distant hum reaching through the broken windows. Jamie imagined his mother searching, calling, the police possibly scouring the neighborhood. But those thoughts were dangerous, he realized, as they heightened anxiety and risked drawing attention to his own actions, however minimal they might be. He closed his eyes, not in sleep, but in forced awareness, a vigil maintained with every fiber of his being. Night fell again, heavier and more oppressive than before. The man's presence was constant, a shadow that moved with purpose, speaking rarely, but always observing. Jamie's senses were heightened to an almost unbearable degree. Every whisper of wind, every rat scuttling in the walls, every distant sound seemed amplified, as though the building itself conspired to trap him further in its web of fear. The man eventually returned to the metal box, examining its contents with deliberate care. He removed a small notebook, pen in hand, and began writing again, pausing occasionally to look at Jamie. Each pause carried significance, a silent communication of dominance. Jamie recognized it as part of the game, a ritual that he could neither refuse nor influence directly. He was a participant in a choreography he did not understand, and the man was the undisputed conductor. Hours slipped by, marked only by the changing angle of light, the rhythm of the man's actions, and Jamie's relentless vigilance. He felt exhaustion pressing upon him, yet sleep remained impossible. His mind raced with scenarios, each more desperate than the last. Escape seemed distant, improbable, yet he clung to the notion with a ferocity born of necessity. Survival demanded it. Finally, the man paused, setting down his pen. He walked over to Jamie and crouched once more, the dim light casting his face partially in shadow. "You will learn," he said quietly, "that compliance is not surrender, but strategy. Every moment you resist, you waste energy. Every moment you observe, you prepare. Understand that, and you may endure what comes next. Jamie nodded again, though inside he felt a storm of conflicting emotions: fear, determination, despair, and a flickering hope. The game had become clear: observe, survive, endure. But even within this understanding, he could feel the seeds of resistance, small and fragile, beginning to grow. He did not yet know how, but he knew he would find a way. As the night deepened, the man moved to his corner, settling down with his notebook, and the room fell into tense silence once again. Jamie lay on the cot, muscles stiff, mind alert, senses sharpened to a razor's edge. He understood the reality now, fully. He was trapped, observed, and catalogued. But within that terror, a plan, however embryonic, began to take root. And in the world of shadows and fear, sometimes the smallest spark could ignite the fiercest blaze. Morning arrived with a dim, reluctant light, sneaking through the broken panes of the abandoned building like a timid intruder. Jamie lay on the cot, every muscle sore, his mind whirring with fragments of the previous night. The man was already awake, sitting cross-legged in the corner with his notebook. He seemed impervious to fatigue, a constant presence of watchfulness and control that drained the very air from the room. "Good morning," the man said casually, though there was nothing ordinary about his tone. It carried a subtle command, a weight of authority that made even the act of breathing seem deferential. Jamie swallowed hard, forcing himself to respond with a quiet, almost imperceptible, "Good morning." The man nodded slightly, jotting something down in his notebook. "Today," he said, "we will begin understanding each other a little more. There is much to learn, and time is both abundant and fleeting." His words were deliberate, each syllable carrying layers of unspoken meaning. Jamie felt the weight of them, an invisible chain tightening around his small frame. The morning hours passed slowly, with the man setting out a small regimen. He provided food, water, and a place to wash using a basin filled with cold water. Even these small acts were laden with psychological weight. They were gestures of control disguised as kindness, a subtle lesson that survival was contingent upon compliance. Jamie understood this instinctively. He ate sparingly, cleaned himself with trembling hands, and avoided eye contact, all while trying to memorize every detail about his surroundings. The building itself was a labyrinth of shadows. Every hallway, every door, every room seemed to hold secrets that the man had catalogued and exploited. Jamie traced the walls with his eyes, noting weak floorboards, broken locks, and shattered glass that might one day serve as tools or traps. His young mind was already at work, forming strategies for escape that were as delicate as the spider's web he imagined the man had spun around him. The man watched silently, his dark eyes following each subtle movement. He occasionally spoke, not with malice but with precision. "Observation is key," he told Jamie. "Do not underestimate the power of noticing the small things. Everything matters. Every hesitation, every glance, every beat of your heart communicates more than you realize." Jamie nodded, forcing his trembling body to obey. He was learning quickly, absorbing lessons that were as much about survival as they were about manipulation and fear. The man was a teacher of terror, and the boy was an unwilling student whose curriculum was life itself. As the day wore on, the man introduced a series of tasks designed to occupy Jamie's mind and assess his responses. Simple chores at first, stacking old papers, moving debris from one corner to another, but each had a hidden purpose. Some objects were marked with subtle scratches, others had hidden notes, tiny signals that the man observed to test comprehension and attention. Jamie realized, painfully, that his every action was scrutinized and catalogued, and even the smallest mistake could invite punishment. By late afternoon, the man shifted to more direct engagement. "Tell me about your friends," he said, his tone casual yet unnerving. Jamie's throat constricted and he hesitated. The man's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and calculating. "Honesty is more valuable than defiance," he added quietly, though no reassurance accompanied the words. They were instructions wrapped in the guise of conversation, an inescapable lesson that truth in this place was dictated by the captor. Jamie spoke slowly, naming names, describing classrooms, recounting events from days long past. Each word was measured, each pause calculated. The man listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally jotting down notes in his ever-present notebook. Jamie felt exposed, every memory laid bare under the silent scrutiny of a mind that had no empathy, only observation. Even as he complied, a spark of resistance flickered within him. Jamie began to imagine scenarios, silent movements, hidden weaknesses in the building, possible moments when the man's attention might lapse. It was a dangerous thought, but also a necessary one. Survival required more than obedience. It required preparation, calculation, and timing. The day wore on into evening. The sun sank low, casting long, distorted shadows across the concrete floor. Jamie's muscles ached, hunger gnawed, but he maintained his vigilance. The man continued his observations, occasionally speaking in cryptic phrases, sometimes leaving the boy in silence for hours. Each interval of quiet was an exercise in psychological endurance, a test of patience and perception. During one of these silent stretches, Jamie noticed something he had not before. A small, loose floorboard near the far wall. His pulse quickened. Could this be a tool? A means of escape? He forced himself to remain calm, aware that any sudden movement could alert the man. Slowly, subtly, he memorized its position, the way it shifted under pressure, the sound it made against the concrete. Every detail mattered. The man eventually spoke, breaking the silence. "You notice things, don't you?" he said, his voice a soft echo in the cavernous room. Jamie froze, unsure if his previous observation had been detected. The man continued, though he did not approach. "Observation is a gift, but it can also be a curse. Too much awareness, and one becomes restless, impatient. Too little, and one becomes predictable. You must find balance." Jamie nodded, unsure of how to respond. He felt a mixture of fear and determination, a recognition that while the man was powerful and controlling, the boy's mind was not entirely his to dominate. There was a space, however narrow, where thought remained free, a place where strategy could germinate even under duress. Nightfall approached, and the man prepared a small dinner, laying it out with careful precision. Jamie ate quietly, mind alert to every nuance, the man's gaze, the rhythm of his breathing, the subtle tension in the air. Each meal was a performance, a ritual of dominance and submission, where the stakes were not measured in monetary or social terms, but in survival. After the meal, the man returned to his corner with the notebook, scribbling furiously. Jamie lay on the cot, listening to the scratching of pen on paper, each sound amplified in the silence. His thoughts wandered briefly to his mother, imagining her frantic search, the police combing the streets, the slow realization that her son had vanished without a trace. The thought was unbearable, yet it steeled him, planting the seed of resolve that he would endure, observe, and one day act. Hours passed. The man finally spoke again, his voice slicing through the stillness. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow brings new lessons, but remember, the night is not over until I say it is." He moved toward the broken window, peering into the darkness, then settled back, eyes half closed, notebook in hand. Jamie remained alert, aware that sleep was a luxury he could not afford. Even closing his eyes felt dangerous, as if surrendering for a moment might be the moment when all hope vanished. Jamie's mind replayed the events of the last 2 days, analyzing patterns, movements, and habits. He noted when the man blinked, when he shifted his weight, the subtle cues that revealed attention and distraction. Each observation was a piece of a puzzle, a map that could one day lead to escape. Fear remained constant, but it was now tempered with focus, an emerging clarity that survival required more than passivity. It required understanding the predator, predicting his behavior, and exploiting opportunities with precision. Outside, the wind whispered through broken windows, carrying faint city sounds that seemed distant, almost unreal. Jamie imagined the world beyond this building. streets lined with familiar faces, the comforting hum of ordinary life, and the warmth of his mother's embrace. That world felt impossibly distant, yet it became his anchor, a mental refuge that reminded him of what he was fighting for. As midnight approached, the man closed his notebook with a deliberate snap. He approached Jamie once more, crouching at eye level. "You are learning," he said softly, though his expression remained unreadable. "Observation, patience, endurance. These are the skills you must master. They will serve you well, if not today, then someday." Jamie nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He understood the words, even as the weight of their meaning pressed upon him. Survival was no longer a matter of luck or chance. It was a deliberate, conscious act that required vigilance, patience, and the careful reading of an unpredictable predator. The man returned to his corner, notebook in hand, and Jamie lay on the cot, muscles aching, mind alert. He closed his eyes briefly, not in sleep, but in focus, mentally rehearsing plans, observing details, cataloging potential weaknesses in the building, potential distractions, and moments when the man's attention might lapse. Every sense was heightened, every thought sharpened by necessity. The night stretched long, oppressive, unyielding, but within Jamie a quiet determination grew, fragile yet resilient. He understood the reality. Escape would not be immediate, and danger was omnipresent. Yet the ember of resolve had ignited, a spark that even the most meticulous predator could not extinguish. The game had deepened, the rules were clear, and the boy was preparing to play with the cunning and patience demanded by the darkness surrounding him. The first light of dawn filtered weakly through the fractured windows, a hesitant intrusion into the oppressive shadows that had dominated the room for 2 days. Jamie stirred on the cot, muscles stiff, mind racing with thoughts of escape, strategy, and survival. The man was already awake, seated in the corner as always, notebook open, pen poised, eyes that seemed to pierce through every layer of deception, every attempt at concealment. "You are thinking," the man said softly, not as a question but as an observation. Jamie froze mid-motion, aware of the accuracy in the statement. The man had a way of seeing, of understanding, that felt almost supernatural. Even when the boy attempted to shield his thoughts behind blank expressions or deliberate stillness, the man's eyes seemed to know, to sense every tremor of his mind. Jamie nodded cautiously, careful not to betray the magnitude of his internal calculations. "Good," the man continued. "Thinking is useful, but acting without discipline is dangerous. Today, we will refine that skill." His voice carried the weight of authority, but beneath it was the subtle thrill of teaching, a predator taking pleasure not in the hunt alone, but in the cultivation of fear and comprehension. Breakfast was provided as usual, measured and controlled. Jamie ate slowly, eyes alert to every movement of the man, every subtle shift in the shadows. Even in these mundane actions, there was an unspoken tension, an underlying rule that every gesture, every bite, every glance was observed, catalogued, and stored in the man's mental ledger. Hunger clawed at Jamie, but he forced himself to maintain composure, knowing that any sign of weakness would be noted, remembered, and used. Once the meal was completed, the man set down his notebook and began to pace the room. His movements were precise, measured, almost ritualistic, each step echoing faintly in the hollow chamber. Jamie observed carefully, committing to memory the rhythm of his predator's movements, the subtle changes in pace, the tiny habits that could one day be exploited. Observation, he realized, was more than survival. It was preparation, the first step in reclaiming some measure of control in a world that had been violently stolen from him. "Tell me about your family," the man said suddenly, halting near the cot. Jamie froze, stomach knotting. The request was familiar, yet each repetition carried a new weight, a test of endurance, a probe into vulnerabilities. Jamie's mind raced as he considered what to reveal, what to withhold. Every detail could be used against him, every memory a potential weapon in the hands of someone who wielded fear like a blade. "I have a mother," he said finally, voice low and trembling, and she loves me. The man nodded slowly, expression unreadable. Love is powerful, he said, but love can be manipulated. It can be a weakness if one is not careful. Remember that. He circled the cot, hand brushing near Jamie's shoulder, a phantom touch that sent shivers down the boy's spine. It is not cruelty to remind you. It is reality. Jamie swallowed hard, nodding again. He understood the warning, the lesson masked in a statement of fact. Every emotion he had, every memory he clung to was now a potential leverage point in this meticulously controlled environment. Fear, understanding, calculation. They were now intertwined in his existence. The man returned to his corner, opening the notebook and scribbling rapidly. Jamie watched the pen move, tracing its lines, imagining the mental framework being constructed. The man cataloged everything: reactions, hesitations, expressions, the smallest flicker of emotion. Jamie realized that his survival required not only compliance but subtlety, the cultivation of appearances that could mislead, misdirect, and conceal true intent. By late morning, the man introduced a new element to their routine. He placed a small set of objects on the floor: a ball of string, a broken lock, a handful of nails, and a small, rusted key. "Today," he said, voice low, "you will demonstrate skill, patience, and observation. The objects themselves are meaningless unless you understand their purpose." Jamie's heart raced as he surveyed the items. Each one seemed innocuous, yet in the context of the man's methods he knew there was more than met the eye. He picked up the key first, examining it carefully. Its weight, its shape, the small imperfections, each detail was a potential clue, a possible utility in some future plan. He then traced the string across the floor, noting its length, texture, and the way it snagged against rough concrete. Every observation was catalogued in his mind with meticulous care. Survival had become a study in minutiae, where even the smallest detail could mean the difference between life and death. The man circled him silently, eyes narrow, taking note of every hesitation, every glance. "Good," he said finally, breaking the silence. "You see beyond the surface. That is a skill worth cultivating. But remember, seeing is not acting. Knowledge without action is merely potential. You must learn the timing of both." Jamie nodded, the words sinking deep. Timing, observation, patience. These were no longer abstract concepts, they were lifelines. He realized that escape would not be a matter of brute force or impulsive action. It would require calculation, stealth, and the exploitation of subtle opportunities. And, above all, it would require endurance, the ability to withstand the psychological pressure that had already begun to erode his will. Afternoon came slowly, bringing with it the oppressive heat that made the small room feel even more stifling. Jamie's stomach gnawed at him, hunger a constant reminder of his dependence. Yet he ate only sparingly, mindful of the man's observations and the subtle dynamics of power that governed every interaction. Each meal was a negotiation, an exercise in maintaining balance between compliance and preservation. The man finally spoke again, walking over to the broken window and peering out. "Do you understand why you are here?" he asked quietly, not turning to face Jamie. The boy hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, unsure whether acknowledgement would invite punishment or reward. "I don't know," he said finally, voice barely audible. "Exactly," the man replied. "You do not know, and that is how it must remain. Uncertainty is a powerful tool, one that keeps you alert, aware, and careful. Never underestimate the influence of not knowing." His words were simple, yet they carried a chilling weight, a reminder that the boy's entire existence was now framed by rules he did not control. Hours passed. The sun sank low, casting distorted patterns of light across the concrete floor. Shadows lengthened, twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. Jamie lay on the cot, muscles stiff, mind alert, listening to the faint sounds of the building settling, the occasional scurry of rats, the distant hum of city life that felt impossibly far away. He mapped every sound, every irregularity, every possible advantage in his mind, constructing a mental blueprint that might one day guide him to freedom. The man returned to the center of the room, crouching beside the boy. "Observation alone is not enough," he said softly. "Action is required. Timing, precision, and awareness must combine. You will understand this soon." He paused, studying Jamie's face, noting the flicker of comprehension and determination. "For now, endurance is your ally. Patience is your weapon. Use them wisely." Jamie nodded, swallowing back fear, pain, and doubt. He understood. Every moment of this captivity was a lesson, a training in the harshest terms. The man's methods were cruel, precise, and relentless, but within them lay a pattern, a rhythm that could be learned, anticipated, and eventually exploited. Evening came, and with it, the familiar darkness that had become a constant companion. The man prepared a simple meal, offering it with the same carefully measured gestures that had become routine. Jamie ate quietly, mind alert, every sense heightened. Hunger, fatigue, and fear were constants, yet he began to feel the faint stirrings of agency, the recognition that even in captivity his mind remained his own. As night fell fully, the man returned to his corner, notebook in hand, and Jamie lay on the cot, tracing the small imperfections of the concrete floor with his eyes. He noted the loose floorboard again, memorizing its position and the way it shifted under pressure. He catalogued the height of the ceiling, the angles of the broken windows, the echo of footsteps. Every detail was a piece of a larger puzzle, a mental map that he would need to navigate if opportunity arose. Sleep remained elusive, replaced by alert vigilance and careful contemplation. Jamie realized that survival was no longer passive. It was a constant mental exercise, a test of observation, patience, and cunning. He understood with a growing clarity that escape would require not only physical effort, but psychological precision. Every moment, every observation, every decision mattered. The man's presence was constant, a shadow of authority and control. Yet within the oppressive atmosphere, Jamie felt the first glimmer of determination, a quiet flame that neither fear nor exhaustion could extinguish. He would endure, he would observe, and one day he would act. The night stretched long, oppressive, unyielding, but within the darkness a plan began to take root. Subtle, fragile, incomplete, but a plan nonetheless. Survival demanded it, and Jamie's mind, sharpened by fear and necessity, would not relent. The room was heavy with silence as dawn crept through the cracks in the boarded windows, painting jagged lines across the cold concrete floor. Jamie's eyes opened slowly, his body tense from another night of wakefulness. His mind immediately went through the mental checklist he had begun forming over the last several days: the placement of furniture, the loose floorboard, the shifting shadows, the rhythm of the man's movements. Each observation was now more than a habit. It was a lifeline. The man was already awake, seated in his usual corner, notebook open, pen in hand. He did not greet Jamie this time, only lifted his eyes for a fraction of a second, enough to make the boy's heart stutter in response. The absence of words carried a quiet menace, a reminder that his presence alone was a form of control. Silence was one of the man's tools, wielded as deftly as a knife, and Jamie had learned that even a single sound could betray inner thoughts, fears, or intentions. "You are thinking again," the man said softly, as if the observation had been waiting to be voiced. Jamie froze mid-breath. The man's insight had grown sharper over time, each day peeling away the boy's defenses until only raw awareness remained. "Good," he continued. "But thinking without action is useless. Observation must lead to understanding, and understanding must eventually lead to choice." Jamie nodded, swallowing hard. He understood that any display of defiance or uncertainty could provoke a reaction, and he could not afford to be careless. The man circled slowly, pen in hand, noting gestures, posture, micro-expressions. Each step, each glance, each shift of weight was catalogued, a psychological map being drawn in real time. Breakfast arrived quietly. A simple meal, bread, a thin slice of cheese, water, but even these gestures of sustenance were imbued with control. Jamie ate sparingly, keenly aware of the man's gaze, aware that every bite, every pause, every gulp was measured for signs of weakness or defiance. Hunger gnawed at him, yet he forced himself to maintain composure, a crucial element in the unspoken game being played. After the meal, the man introduced a task, seemingly mundane, yet loaded with intent. He placed a small collection of items on the floor, a set of nails, a short length of wire, a broken padlock, and a small, sharp knife. These objects, he said, voice soft but precise, are not what they appear to be. Your job is to determine how they might be used. Observation, imagination, and patience will serve you well. Jamie's stomach twisted. The knife alone was a symbol of danger, a reminder of the fine line between survival and peril. Yet he approached the objects with care, careful not to touch them recklessly, careful not to betray curiosity or fear. He examined the wire, noting its length, its flexibility, the nails, their rusted points, the padlock, its mechanism still functional but fragile. Every detail was catalogued, every possibility considered. The man watched silently, his eyes sharp, calculating. "Good," he murmured. "You see, but do you understand? Observation is the foundation, but comprehension requires patience. Every action, every decision must be deliberate. One misstep can cost dearly." Jamie nodded, forcing calm into his body. Patience had become a survival skill. Every glance, every movement, every thought was weighed against the potential consequences. Escape could not be impulsive. It required meticulous planning, the careful reading of the man's habits and rhythms, the identification of weakness hidden beneath layers of control. The hours stretched. The afternoon sun cast distorted patterns of light through the broken panes, shifting across the walls and floor as if moving in tandem with the man's subtle rhythms. Jamie's mind remained alert, cataloging every sound, the scratch of the pen, the soft scuff of shoes against concrete, the faint echo of wind outside. Each sensory detail became a piece of the puzzle, a potential advantage to exploit when opportunity arose. At one point, the man approached Jamie, crouching to eye level. "You are aware," he said, voice deceptively gentle, "but awareness alone is not enough. You must anticipate, prepare, and act. Survival is not merely endurance. It is action guided by calculation. Remember that." He straightened, returning to his corner, notebook in hand, leaving Jamie to process the words. Jamie lay on the cot afterward, thinking. The loose floorboard had been on his mind all day. He had observed its placement, the way it shifted under pressure, the sound it made against the concrete. Each detail could be crucial. If the moment ever came, he would need to act with precision, exploiting knowledge gained through careful observation. Yet the risk of acting prematurely was immense. One mistake could invite immediate and devastating consequences. Even as the day wore on, Jamie felt a growing resolve. Fear remained, sharp and present, yet beneath it was determination, a fragile, flickering ember that refused to be extinguished. He understood that endurance alone would not save him. He needed to combine vigilance with strategy, patience with timing, and observation with action. Each day in captivity was a lesson, each interaction a test, each gesture a clue. By evening, the man's behavior shifted slightly. He became more methodical, almost ritualistic, arranging objects, checking corners, and scribbling rapidly in the notebook. Jamie noted the consistency in these routines. The man's habits, though intimidating and precise, were predictable to an extent. This observation was a breakthrough, small yet significant. It suggested the possibility of identifying patterns, anticipating movements, and perhaps one day exploiting them. Dinner was served, the same ritualized, controlled presentation. Jamie ate quietly, senses sharp. He noted the way the man placed utensils, the angle of his movements, the speed with which he scanned the room afterward. Each detail reinforced the mental map Jamie had been constructing over days of captivity, a blueprint that might guide him to freedom if he could remain patient and alert. After the meal, the man returned to his corner with the notebook, the scratching of pen against paper filling the room. Jamie lay on the cot, muscles aching, mind alert. He traced the loose floorboard with his eyes again, memorizing every nuance, every angle, every subtle shift under his imagined pressure. He mentally rehearsed actions, potential movements, and contingencies, every detail catalogued for future use. Hours passed, the room heavy with darkness. The man occasionally spoke, cryptic phrases about patience, observation, and the consequences of miscalculation. Jamie listened, absorbing, analyzing, internalizing the lessons hidden within the statements. Fear was ever present, yet it had evolved into a tool rather than a mere burden. It sharpened his senses, honed his awareness, and fueled the ember of determination that now burned steadily within him. Jamie's thoughts drifted briefly to his mother, to the outside world, to the life that seemed impossibly distant. Each thought was a reminder of what was at stake, each memory a motivation. Survival was no longer simply about enduring. It was about reclaiming agency, about finding a way to act decisively when the opportunity presented itself. The spark of strategy was growing into a plan, fragile yet increasingly tangible. The night stretched long, oppressive, yet Jamie remained vigilant. He catalogued every sound, every movement, every subtle shift in the man's attention. Patterns emerged. Habits, though subtle, were there. Repetitions that could be predicted, exploited, and used as leverage. Patience, observation, endurance. These were now his tools, sharpened with necessity. Finally, the man closed his notebook and moved toward Jamie, crouching once again at eye level. "You are learning," he said softly. "But learning is not enough. You must integrate knowledge with action. Timing, patience, and precision must converge. Remember this, for the day will come when you must choose. Survival is not a gift. It is an achievement." Jamie nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He felt the weight of the words, the quiet power of the statement. The ember within him glowed brighter, a combination of fear, determination, and nascent strategy. He understood the reality. Escape, if it came, would require careful observation, patience, and calculated action. Every movement of the man, every habit, every small routine had become data, a resource for survival that Jamie would need to exploit when the time was right. The man returned to his corner, settling with his notebook as the room fell into tense silence. Jamie lay on the cot, eyes open, muscles tense, mind working relentlessly. He traced the imperfections in the floor, the angles of the walls, the placement of debris, and the sounds of the building settling. Each detail was a potential advantage, each observation a step toward reclaiming some measure of control in a world that had been violently stolen from him. Night deepened, shadows stretching long and oppressive across the concrete floor. Jamie's mind raced, cataloging, planning, anticipating. Fear was still present, but it had transformed into focus, a sharp, precise tool that guided every thought, every imagined action, every calculation. He understood now that survival was an active process, not a passive state, and that knowledge, patience, and timing were as vital as strength or endurance. The man's presence remained constant, a shadow that dominated the room, but within it, Jamie felt the first stirrings of hope, fragile yet persistent. The ember of determination had ignited, growing steadily, fueled by observation, calculation, and the unwavering will to survive. Every day, every hour, every interaction was shaping him, preparing him for the moment when opportunity would finally arise. And in the darkness, a plan was beginning to form, one that would require courage, patience, and a precision born of necessity. The next morning arrived with a strange quietness, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Jamie awoke slowly, muscles stiff and senses alert. He had long since stopped expecting comfort in sleep. Night offered no respite, only a prolonged observation period during which the mind sharpened or broke under the weight of fear. He had learned to use those hours to plan, to rehearse, to catalog every detail. The man was already awake, seated in his corner with notebook open. He didn't speak immediately, only lifted his head briefly, eyes flickering to Jamie with a predator's precision. Silence stretched between them, dense, oppressive, and full of unspoken rules. Jamie's body tensed instinctively, his mind already scanning the environment for details, opportunities, weaknesses. Finally, the man spoke, voice calm but edged with authority. "You are adjusting," he said. "Adaptation is a survival skill. But remember, adaptation without awareness is dangerous. You may survive the moment, but at what cost? Observation is as important as endurance." Jamie nodded, forcing himself to swallow the tremor of fear in his throat. Every day with the man was a test of patience, a psychological negotiation in which even compliance could be a weapon if wielded subtly. He understood the delicate balance. Too much compliance and he became predictable. Too much resistance and he risked immediate retribution. Survival required both intelligence and restraint. Breakfast was brought, the same ritualized pattern of bread, water, and thinly sliced cheese. Jamie ate slowly, focusing on the nuances of the man's movements, the subtle flex of his hand as he scribbled in the notebook, the occasional twitch of the jaw, the measured breathing that suggested concentration or irritation. Every small cue was a potential signal, a tool for anticipating behavior. He noted the rhythm of footsteps, the way shadows shifted as the sun moved, the precise angles of light and shadow across the floor. After the meal, the man set out a new exercise. He laid several objects on the floor: a small mirror, a length of rope, a piece of wire, and an old, dented can. "Observation alone is insufficient," he said. "You must understand the utility of objects, the potential of situations, the hidden implications of actions. Today, you will demonstrate comprehension." Jamie approached the objects cautiously. He inspected the mirror first, noting the size, the angle, and the way it reflected light. He then examined the rope, running his fingers along its coarse texture, noting knots and frays. The wire was flexible but strong. The can was light but capable of creating sound or distraction. Each item held multiple possibilities, and Jamie cataloged them all silently, carefully imagining their potential applications without acting impulsively. The man circled him, pen poised, eyes sharp. "Good," he said, almost approvingly. "Imagination without foresight is useless. You must anticipate consequences, predict reactions, and measure outcomes. The environment, the tools, the timing, all are part of the equation. Remember this." Hours passed with repetitive precision. Jamie followed the routines, completing tasks as instructed, all the while observing and analyzing. He noted the man's habits. When he became momentarily distracted, how his hand twitched when he was thinking, the faint patterns in his pacing. Even the silence had rhythm, the pauses almost imperceptible but present, each one a potential cue for timing and action. During one pause, Jamie discovered something new. A corner of the room contained a pile of debris, a stack of broken wooden boards, bricks, and dust. He noticed a small crevice between the boards, enough to hide a hand or a small object. It was insignificant, yet it represented opportunity, a space that the man might not watch constantly, a small crack in the otherwise impermeable control. He memorized its location, the sound of movement near it, and the subtle patterns of attention that governed the man's focus. By mid-afternoon, the man shifted focus. He sat across from Jamie on the cot, notebook closed, and studied him closely. "You are learning," he said softly. "But learning is not enough. Knowledge must be applied. Awareness without execution is wasted potential. Timing, strategy, and patience, these are the pillars of survival." Jamie nodded, swallowing hard. The weight of the words pressed down on him, but instead of paralyzing fear, they sparked a quiet determination. He realized that every action, no matter how small, could be leveraged for future advantage. Every observation was a potential tool. every habit a potential vulnerability to exploit. Escape was no longer an abstract hope. It had become a strategy, delicate but conceivable. The man then presented a challenge. He led Jamie to the far side of the room where a locked cabinet stood. "Inside," he said, "are items you must identify without opening the lock. Description, reasoning, and accuracy are critical." He handed Jamie the small mirror and a length of rope. "These are your tools. Consider them carefully." Jamie approached with caution, examining the cabinet and its lock. Using the mirror, he could angle his view to see the hinges and check for tampering. The rope became a support for leverage, allowing him to probe the base without direct contact. Each movement was deliberate, careful, slow, minimizing sound and avoiding attention. He hypothesized the contents, noting weight, distribution, and possible objects, creating a mental inventory without ever touching the cabinet directly. The man observed silently, expression unreadable. "Very good," he said finally. "Observation, deduction, patience, you are beginning to combine these elements. But remember, even the most careful plan can fail if you act too soon or misread a signal. Timing is everything." Jamie absorbed the lesson, noting the precision of the man's speech and the subtle threats hidden in the advice. Each day was a psychological gauntlet, every interaction layered with tests and subtests, an intricate web designed to stretch his mind to its limits. Yet, within that structure, Jamie found moments of empowerment, awareness, strategy, and the knowledge that the smallest detail could become a lever for change. Evening brought the usual meal. Jamie ate quietly, noting again the man's behaviors, the angle of his gaze, the subtle shifts in posture, the rhythm of his movements. Patterns were forming, habits emerging. For the first time, Jamie felt a sense of agency, however small. He understood that his survival would depend not on brute strength but on mental acuity, timing, and precision. After dinner, the man returned to his corner, notebook in hand, scribbling for an extended period. Jamie lay on the cot, eyes fixed on the ceiling, muscles aching from tension, mind alive with possibilities. The loose floorboard, the crevice in the debris, the angle of light from the window, each element became part of a mental map, a silent blueprint for future action. As night deepened, Jamie's thoughts turned toward timing. He visualized the man's routines, the subtle signs of distraction, the periods of movement and stillness. Patience had become a weapon. Observation had become a shield. He rehearsed sequences of action in his mind, cataloging outcomes and contingencies, testing scenarios that might arise if he chose to act. Fear remained, a constant companion, but it had transformed into focus. Every sound, every movement, every pause carried significance. Jamie's mind worked tirelessly, integrating lessons learned into a coherent framework of survival. He understood now that the moment of opportunity might not come for days, but when it did, he had to be ready, precise, and unflinching. Finally, the man closed his notebook and spoke. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow we'll test the skills you are developing. Observation, patience, and understanding will be required in ways you have not yet imagined. Be ready." Jamie lay on the cot, eyes open, body tense, mind racing. The ember of determination burned brighter, fueled by knowledge, strategy, and the anticipation of action. The loose floorboard, the debris crevice, the patterns of routine, all were pieces of a puzzle that might one day offer freedom. Each day had honed his awareness, sharpened his patience, and strengthened his resolve. The room settled into silence once more, shadows stretching long and dark across the floor. Jamie traced every corner with his eyes, memorized the smallest irregularities, and rehearsed potential scenarios. The psychological tension was a constant, yet it had become an instrument, a means of refining focus and strategy. Survival was no longer a passive act. It had become an intricate game of observation, calculation, and preparation. Night wore on, oppressive but instructive. The man's presence was unwavering, yet within the constraints of captivity, Jamie felt the first stirrings of hope. He understood that escape would not be immediate, not impulsive, but it was conceivable, and within that knowledge, a quiet flame of determination glimmered, a promise that he would endure, learn, and act when the time was right. Dawn arrived pale and fragile, seeping through the cracks in the boarded windows like hesitant fingers probing a dark room. Jamie stirred, muscles stiff, mind taut. Nights were no longer restful. Sleep had become a strategic pause, a necessary interlude for observation and planning. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in the man's posture had been catalogued, and Jamie's mind had become a repository of details, small but crucial, that might one day offer him leverage. The man was already awake, seated in his corner, notebook open, pen hovering in anticipation. He did not speak at first, merely lifted his eyes in a glance that carried the weight of judgment and calculation. Silence stretched between them, thick and deliberate. Jamie's body tensed instinctively, muscles coiled like springs. Years of instinct, sharpened by fear, had taught him that the man's quiet moments were often more dangerous than his outbursts. "You are learning the rhythm," the man said finally, his voice soft but commanding. "Observation is no longer passive. It must inform action. Comprehension without application is wasted energy. Remember that." Jamie nodded, suppressing the tremor that threatened to betray him. Each day had become a test of mental endurance, a complex interplay of compliance and subtle defiance. Too much compliance, and he became predictable. Too much resistance, and he risked immediate punishment. Survival required balance, intelligence, and self-control, and Jamie was beginning to feel the fragile emergence of agency within this carefully controlled environment. Breakfast arrived as usual. Bread, a thin slice of cheese, and water. Jamie ate slowly, eyes scanning the man's every movement. He noted the way the pen scratched the notebook, the subtle tension in his shoulders, the rhythm of his breathing. Every micro-expression was recorded silently in Jamie's mind, each subtle cue potentially significant. Hunger gnawed at him, but he forced himself to focus on observation, understanding that control over his own reactions was as critical as the management of physical needs. After the meal, the man introduced a new task. He placed several items on the floor, a coil of rope, a broken padlock, a small hammer, and a rusted key. "These are not mere objects," he said. "Their value lies in understanding their potential. Imagination, precision, and patience will serve you well. Today, you will demonstrate your ability to combine observation with foresight." Jamie approached cautiously, examining each object. The rope was rough, strong, and flexible. The padlock, though broken, could be manipulated with care. The hammer was light but capable of precise strikes. The key was small but intricately cut. Each item had multiple possibilities, and Jamie catalogued them all in his mind, imagining scenarios in which they might be applied without making any sudden or revealing movement. The man circled him silently, pen poised. "Good," he said finally. "But imagination without calculation is dangerous. Every action carries consequences. Anticipate outcomes, weigh risks, and act with precision. Timing is everything." Jamie's thoughts raced. The loose floorboard, the crevice in the pile of debris, the angles of light, each element could play a role in a future plan. Observation was no longer passive, it was the foundation for potential action. Every sound, every gesture, every habit of the man's now formed part of a mental map, a blueprint for eventual escape. As the hours passed, the man shifted his focus, testing Jamie's awareness. He arranged a series of small challenges across the room, moving objects subtly, leaving small notes that had to be interpreted, creating minor obstacles that required problem-solving. Jamie navigated each carefully, making mental notes of timing, movement, and the man's attention span. Each success was small but vital, reinforcing both his confidence and his understanding of the rules governing this strange and terrifying environment. By mid-afternoon, Jamie noticed a pattern. The man's pacing, his occasional distractions, and the way he checked the corners of the room all followed a rhythm. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet consistent. The realization was empowering. Even in this controlled environment, predictability existed, and predictability could be exploited. Jamie began to refine his mental plan, noting the windows of opportunity that might arise, the moments in which a carefully executed move could avoid immediate detection. The man approached again, crouching near the cot, notebook closed. "You are learning," he said softly, "but learning is not enough. Observation must be translated into action. Timing, patience, and precision must converge for survival. Do not forget, a single misstep can undo days of careful calculation." Jamie nodded, absorbing the warning. Fear remained, constant and sharp, yet it had transformed into a tool, heightening awareness and sharpening judgment. He understood now that every gesture, every micro-expression, every shift in the environment held significance. Survival depended not on brute strength, but on the precise application of knowledge, observation, and timing. The man returned to his corner, resuming scribbling in the notebook. Jamie lay on the cot, muscles aching, mind active. He traced the loose floorboard with his eyes, memorized the crevice in the debris, and reviewed the patterns of movement he had observed. Each small detail was a potential advantage, a critical element in the delicate balance between captivity and freedom. Nightfall arrived with its familiar oppressive weight. Jamie remained vigilant, cataloging every shadow, every sound, every subtle movement of the man. Patterns were now clearer, habits more discernible. He visualized potential actions, rehearsing scenarios in which he might exploit even the smallest lapse in attention. Patience had become a weapon, awareness a shield. Every instinct, every observation, every fragment of knowledge contributed to the growing plan forming in his mind. Dinner passed in silence, the man meticulous in his presentation, Jamie meticulous in his observation. Every detail, the placement of utensils, the slight shift in posture, the angle of gaze, was noted and stored. He began to feel a fragile sense of control, small but real, as though the mental preparation itself provided a layer of protection against the omnipresent fear. After the meal, the man initiated a new ritual. He placed several small objects on the floor, a broken piece of chain, a rusty nail, a small fragment of glass, and a tightly coiled spring. "These are exercises," he said. "You will analyze their properties, their potential use, and their limitations. Precision, foresight, and patience will determine your success." Jamie approached cautiously, cataloging each item's characteristics. The chain could support weight or be used as a distraction. The nail could function as a tool or a signal. The glass fragment could cut, reflect, or intimidate. The spring could store energy, release tension, or trigger movement. He examined angles, weight, balance, and potential applications, committing every observation to memory. The man circled silently, eyes sharp. "Very good," he said. "Understanding tools is one thing. Understanding context is another. Timing, placement, and strategy are equally important. Remember, opportunity is rarely obvious. It must be anticipated." Jamie absorbed the lesson, aware that the man's constant testing was designed not only to teach, but to condition, to monitor, and to assert dominance. Yet, within the constraints, he sensed possibility. Patterns, habits, rhythms, each could be exploited with patience and precision. Every small exercise was a rehearsal for a future he intended to reclaim. As night deepened, the man closed the notebook and settled into his corner. Jamie lay on the cot, eyes open, mind racing. The loose floorboard, the debris crevice, the subtle shifts in attention, all were integrated into a growing plan. Fear remained, a shadow in every corner, but alongside it burned determination, sharpened awareness, and the first true sense of agency he had experienced since captivity began. He rehearsed scenarios in silence, weighing timing, actions, and contingencies. Escape was no longer a distant hope. It was a complex, carefully mapped objective. Patience, observation, endurance, and timing had become tools, each as essential as breath itself. Jamie understood now that survival would demand mental precision, courage, and unwavering focus. Outside, the city continued unaware of the quiet struggle within the small, isolated room. The man's presence was constant, oppressive, yet it had inadvertently created an environment in which Jamie's mind had grown sharper, faster, more aware. Every interaction, every lesson, every subtle test was contributing to a growing plan, a carefully cultivated readiness. As sleep finally claimed him, it was not a surrender to fatigue, but a strategic pause. The ember of determination glimmered, steady and unyielding, feeding on observation, knowledge, and the growing understanding of opportunity. Jamie knew that the path to freedom would be long, perilous, and demanding, but within the darkness of captivity, a plan had begun to crystallize, a blueprint for action that might one day lead him back to life beyond the shadows. The morning air carried a strange stillness, the kind of silence that made every creak of the building feel louder than it was. Jamie woke, his muscles stiff and aching from another restless night, but his mind was alert, already cataloging sounds, shadows, and the faint smell of dust and damp concrete. Each day of captivity had transformed him. Fear was no longer just a sensation, it was a sharpened awareness, a tool as precise as any weapon he might one day find. The man was awake before him, seated in his usual corner with notebook in hand. He did not speak at first, merely observing, his eyes scanning every twitch, every subtle breath, every shift in posture. Jamie had learned long ago that these moments were more dangerous than any outburst. The man's silence carried a weight, an unspoken measurement of control. The boy held his gaze just long enough to show attentiveness without provocation, and the man nodded almost imperceptibly, a signal Jamie had come to recognize as approval. "You are becoming more aware," the man said at last, voice smooth and deliberate. "Observation is essential, but comprehension must follow. You are learning to see, but now you must learn to interpret. Every detail has meaning. Every habit reveals intention. Do you understand?" Jamie nodded, swallowing hard. His throat was dry, but he forced the action, keeping his body still and his mind focused. Compliance was only one piece of the puzzle. Subtlety, observation, and calculation were equally critical. Each day brought lessons, some overt, some hidden, and each lesson built toward a single, unspoken objective: survival and, eventually, escape. Breakfast was as routine as ever: a piece of bread, a thin slice of cheese, a small cup of water. Jamie ate slowly, studying the man carefully. The pen in the notebook scratched in rhythm with the tapping of his fingers. His eyes flicked to corners and walls in a pattern that was now predictable to Jamie, and his breathing carried the faintest hints of impatience or contemplation. Every nuance was stored, every observation noted in the mental catalog that had become Jamie's lifeline. After the meal, the man presented a new task, something different from the exercises of the previous days. A small wooden box, locked with a simple latch, was placed in front of Jamie. "Inside," he said, "are items you must assess without opening the box. Reasoning, observation, and deduction are required. Accuracy is vital." Jamie studied the box carefully. Its weight, balance, and the sound it made when gently shaken suggested a variety of possible contents. He used the mirror he had been allowed earlier, angling it to see the underside and edges of the box without touching it directly. The man circled, pen in hand, eyes sharp and unblinking, cataloging Jamie's every movement. "You are thinking," he said softly. "Good, but do not mistake thought for understanding. Knowledge without correct application is useless. Each decision carries consequences. Predict, anticipate, and act with precision." Jamie nodded again. He noted the subtle shift in the man's attention as he crouched to inspect a floorboard near the cot, the faint creak that accompanied his step, the minute hesitation before he straightened again. Patterns were emerging, subtle but undeniable, and Jamie's mind mapped them meticulously. Every routine, every movement, every pause could be significant. Hours passed. Jamie remained alert, cataloging details, rehearsing scenarios in his mind. The loose floorboard, the hidden crevice in the pile of debris, the angles of light from the broken windows, all became components of an intricate mental plan. patience had become a weapon. Observation, a shield. Every micro-moment of distraction or routine became potential leverage for the future, and Jamie's mind worked tirelessly, assembling a strategy that he had not yet dared to voice aloud, even in thought. By mid-afternoon, the man changed his focus. He pulled a small collection of objects from the wooden box he had placed earlier, a coil of thin wire, a length of twine, a short metal rod, and a worn leather strap. "These are not simple items," he said, voice calm but firm. "You will examine them and determine their potential uses. Creativity, foresight, and careful planning will be tested. Your comprehension must guide your hands and thoughts alike." Jamie approached cautiously, cataloging each object silently. The wire could bind or signal, the twine could secure or trigger, the rod could leverage or distract, and the strap could fasten or restrain. Every element had multiple possibilities, and Jamie's mind raced through scenarios, imagining contingencies, potential outcomes, and precise timing. He dared not act too quickly, aware that impatience could invite immediate danger. The man circled, pen poised, watching closely. "Very good," he said. "But understanding alone is insufficient. Awareness must inform action. Timing is critical. A plan is nothing without opportunity, and opportunity is fleeting. Be patient." Jamie absorbed the lesson, each word reinforcing the strategy that had been quietly forming in his mind over the past days. The patterns of the man's movements, his routines, and his habits were now clearer than ever. Each small repetition, each subtle distraction, each momentary lapse could be leveraged if he chose the right moment. The ember of hope, small but growing, glimmered more vividly than it had in weeks. As evening approached, the man returned to his corner with his notebook, writing rapidly in silence. Jamie lay on the cot, muscles stiff, mind working tirelessly. He mentally rehearsed sequences of action, how to move without noise, how to use objects as leverage, how to exploit patterns of distraction, and how to maintain composure under observation. Every element had been cataloged, analyzed, and rehearsed mentally. Patience, strategy, and timing were all now tangible components of his survival. Dinner passed in silence. Jamie ate carefully, noting the man's expressions, posture, and mannerisms. Subtle cues, a twitch of the jaw, a fleeting glance, the pattern of pen movement, were all now meaningful, forming a comprehensive map of behavior. The man's routines, though designed to assert control, had inadvertently provided Jamie with the data needed to identify openings, moments in which careful, calculated action could yield advantage. Night deepened. Jamie traced the loose floorboard with his eyes once more, reviewed the crevice in the debris, and mentally rehearsed potential sequences of movement and leverage. He imagined testing the tension of the wire, the flexibility of the twine, and the balance of the rod. Every rehearsal was a step toward mastery, every mental simulation a safeguard against error. The psychological tension of captivity had transformed into a refined awareness, a heightened sense of readiness that would be essential when opportunity finally arrived. The man closed his notebook and addressed Jamie directly. "Tomorrow we'll test your comprehension and timing. Every observation, every lesson, every moment of patience will matter. Survival is not endurance alone. It is the precise application of knowledge under pressure. Prepare yourself." Jamie nodded, the weight of anticipation pressing on his chest, yet tempered by a growing confidence. He understood the stakes. The man's control was formidable, but patterns existed, and patterns could be exploited. Escape would not be impulsive. It would require exact timing, precise execution, and a calm mind. Each day had built toward this point, and now the strategy was forming into something more than imagination. It was becoming tangible, a plan rooted in observation, calculation, and patience. As he lay on the cot, eyes open, Jamie reviewed every detail one final time before sleep claimed him. The loose floorboard, the crevice, the shadows, the angles of light, and the rhythm of the man's movements, all were carefully integrated into a mental blueprint. Fear remained, but it was now a measured, focused force, one that fueled awareness and sharpened judgment rather than paralyzed action. The night stretched long, oppressive, yet instructive. Every creak, every faint shift in air, every shadow that moved along the walls became data. Jamie catalogued and analyzed, rehearsed and planned, transforming the oppressive weight of captivity into a structured exercise in survival. Within the darkness, a plan was quietly solidifying, a strategy that would one day move from imagination to execution. And somewhere deep inside, amidst the fear, the determination glimmered stronger. Jamie understood that freedom was not immediate, that it would require patience, timing, and precision. But for the first time in weeks, he could feel the possibility of control. Fragile, tentative, yet unmistakable. He was no longer merely surviving. He was preparing. Morning came with an unnatural quiet, the kind of silence that seemed to press against Jamie's ears, amplifying every minor sound in the room. His muscles ached, his joints stiffened from another night of fitful, anxious sleep, yet his mind was alive, cataloging every detail, as it had become instinct over the past days. Each sound, the creak of the floorboards, the whisper of wind through cracks in the boarded windows, was meticulously recorded, parsed, and stored. Each shadow cast by the weak dawn light was carefully noted, every nuance analyzed for patterns or opportunities. The man was already awake, as usual, notebook in hand, pen poised like a weapon. He did not speak immediately, merely observed. The weight of his gaze pressed down, evaluating, calculating, testing. Jamie had learned to hold still during these moments, maintaining an impression of compliance while mentally rehearsing contingencies, timing, and responses. One flicker of expression, one misjudged glance could invite scrutiny or punishment. Patience and restraint had become as vital as oxygen. "You are becoming attuned," the man finally said, voice soft but precise. "Observation is no longer passive. It must feed comprehension. Awareness without action is worthless, as is action without awareness. Understand the distinction." Jamie nodded silently. The statement hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Compliance alone was insufficient. He had to integrate observation, reasoning, and action. Every gesture, every micro-expression, every pause carried significance, and Jamie's mind catalogued it all, weaving a growing mental blueprint for the day he might finally act. Breakfast was delivered with the usual precision. Bread, a thin slice of cheese, a small cup of water. Jamie ate slowly, eyes scanning the man's movements, noting the subtle flex of the hand, the rhythm of breathing, the brief pauses as the pen hovered over the notebook. Every observation strengthened his awareness, providing information that could one day become leverage, an edge to exploit when opportunity finally presented itself. After the meal, the man presented a new task. A small, locked metal box was placed in front of Jamie, its surface worn and scratched. "Inside," the man said, "are items you must evaluate without opening it. Reasoning, deduction, and patience are your tools. Your observations must guide you accurately." Jamie approached carefully, inspecting the box from multiple angles. He shook it gently, listened to subtle movements within, examined the lock and hinges. He used the small mirror he had previously been allowed to angle, catching glimpses of the underside without direct contact. Each detail was stored, analyzed, and catalogued silently. The man circled, pen in hand, eyes never leaving Jamie. "You are thinking," the man said finally. "Good. But remember, knowledge alone is insufficient. You must apply it precisely. A miscalculation now could undo all you have learned. Timing is essential. Anticipate, prepare, execute with care." Hours passed. Jamie remained attentive, observing every sound, every shadow, every subtle movement. He refined his mental map of the room, noting the loose floorboard, the crevice in the pile of debris, and the angles of light from the broken windows. Patterns emerged, and with them came the possibility of action. Careful, deliberate, calculated action. He rehearsed sequences silently, imagining steps, timing, and contingencies, running through each scenario with obsessive precision. Mid-afternoon, the man's attention shifted. He produced a collection of small objects from the box: a coil of wire, a short leather strap, a small hammer, and a length of rope. "These are exercises in comprehension and foresight," he said. "Evaluate their potential. Consider multiple outcomes. Timing, precision, and creativity are essential. Do not act impulsively. Observe first, act second. Act." Jamie catalogued each object in his mind. The wire could bind, signal, or manipulate. The strap could restrain or secure. The hammer could apply force or serve as leverage. The rope could support, tether, or trigger. He mentally rehearsed how each might be used, testing sequences and consequences without revealing his thoughts or intentions. Observation had become instinct, every micro-detail a potential advantage. The man circled, eyes sharp. "Very good," he said. "But comprehension alone is insufficient. Understanding must guide action. Timing is critical. Even a perfect plan can fail if executed too soon or too late. Be patient." Jamie absorbed the lesson silently. Over the past days, he had begun to see patterns in the man's behavior: subtle distractions, pauses in movement, micro-signals in posture and gaze. Each habit, each routine, each slight variation was data, building the foundation for a plan he had not yet dared to act upon. The ember of possibility burned brighter, tempered by caution and observation. Evening arrived, carrying the familiar oppressive weight. Jamie lay on the cot, eyes fixed on the ceiling, reviewing every detail in his mind. The loose floorboard, the crevice, the angles of light, and the rhythm of the man's movements were integrated into a mental strategy. He rehearsed sequences of action silently, anticipating potential obstacles, calculating risk, and refining timing. Fear remained, but it had become a tool, sharpening focus and enhancing awareness rather than paralyzing him. Dinner passed in quiet tension. Jamie ate deliberately, noting every expression, every shift in posture, every subtle movement of the man. The patterns were clearer than ever, the small routines predictable and exploitable. Each observation became a piece of a complex puzzle, forming a blueprint for survival that extended beyond mere endurance into the realm of precise, calculated action. After dinner, the man initiated a final test for the day. He placed several small objects on the floor: a broken chain, a piece of glass, a short length of wire, and a coil of twine. "These are exercises in foresight," he said. "Analyze potential uses, evaluate risk, anticipate consequences. Your comprehension, timing, and precision will be tested. Even minor errors can." "Heavy serious. Consequences." Jamie approached cautiously, examining each item. The chain could provide leverage or distraction. The glass could cut or signal, the wire could bind or manipulate, and the twine could secure, trigger, or tether. He rehearsed sequences silently, imagining outcomes, testing contingencies, and cataloging every detail for later use. Patience, observation, and precise calculation were now essential elements of his survival toolkit. The man circled silently, pen poised. "Very good," he said finally. "Understanding tools is one thing. Understanding context is another. Anticipate, calculate, and act with precision. Opportunity is fleeting. Timing is everything." Jamie absorbed the lesson, each word reinforcing the mental blueprint that had been forming over the past days. Patterns, routines, rhythms. Each could be exploited with careful observation and precise timing. The ember of hope, fragile but persistent, glimmered more brightly than ever, providing a sense of agency that had been absent since the beginning of captivity. Night deepened, and Jamie lay on the cot, muscles aching, mind alive with strategy and anticipation. The loose floorboard, the crevice in the debris, the angles of light from the windows, and the subtle patterns of the man's movement, all were integrated into a growing plan. Every rehearsal, every silent observation, every minor calculation was a step toward eventual action. Fear remained, omnipresent and sharp, yet it had evolved into focused awareness. Every sound, every shift in shadow, every slight hesitation carried significance. Jamie's mind worked tirelessly, integrating lessons learned into a coherent strategy. He understood that the moment of opportunity might not arrive for days, but when it did, he would be ready. Precision, patience, and timing would guide him. As the man closed his notebook and settled into his corner, Jamie continued his mental rehearsals. He imagined testing the loose floorboard, exploiting the crevice in the debris, using the objects around him, and timing his actions to coincide with predictable moments of distraction. Every scenario was carefully calculated, every potential outcome weighed. The psychological tension of captivity had transformed into preparation and anticipation. Sleep eventually claimed him, but it was not a surrender. It was a strategic pause. The ember of determination burned steadily, fueled by observation, knowledge, and the growing understanding of opportunity. Jamie knew that survival required more than endurance. It demanded patience, precision, and mental acuity. Within the darkness of the small, oppressive room, a plan was quietly solidifying, a blueprint for action that might one day lead him back to freedom. The next morning broke gray and muted, the weak sunlight creeping through the cracks in the boarded windows like cautious fingers. Jamie stirred slowly, every muscle aching from another night of tense sleep, his mind alert despite the exhaustion. Each morning was a rehearsal in awareness, each hour an exercise in observation and preparation. Fear had become a constant companion, but it was now sharpened into focus, a tool to navigate the oppressive reality around him. The man was already awake, seated in his usual corner, notebook in hand. He did not speak at once, simply observing, his eyes moving with precise calculation, noting subtle shifts in Jamie's posture and facial expression. Jamie had learned that these quiet moments were often more dangerous than outbursts. Every twitch, every blink, every tremor in his body could be measured, analyzed, and recorded by the man. He held himself perfectly still, his gaze attentive but careful, aware that the man's scrutiny was constant and deliberate. "You are becoming attuned," the man said at last, voice smooth, controlled, yet carrying a sharp edge beneath the calm. "Observation must be coupled with interpretation. Awareness without insight is wasted energy, and insight without action is irrelevant. Understand the difference." Jamie nodded silently, forcing the words down his throat. Compliance was necessary, but it was the mental rehearsal, the internal analysis, that offered true advantage. Over the past days, he had begun to catalog every subtle pattern, every momentary lapse, every predictable gesture. He had begun to see that even the man's seemingly flawless control had small cracks, imperfections that could one day be leveraged. Breakfast arrived, the usual ration of bread, a thin slice of cheese, and a small cup of water. Jamie ate slowly, eyes scanning the man's movements. The faint tapping of pen against paper, the tilt of his head as he wrote, the rhythm of his breath, all of it was noted, stored, and analyzed. Every detail, however small, could be a key to understanding the man's patterns, a potential lever to exploit when the time came. After the meal, the man set a new challenge. He placed a small, locked wooden box on the floor, its edges worn and scratched. "Inside are items you must assess without opening it," he said. "Reasoning, deduction, and patience are your tools. Your observations must guide your understanding." Jamie approached cautiously, examining the box from multiple angles. He shook it gently, listened to the subtle sounds inside, examined the lock and hinges. Using the small mirror he had been allowed earlier, he viewed the underside without touching it directly. Every detail, every nuance was recorded mentally. The man circled him silently, pen poised, eyes sharp, never leaving Jamie's movements. "You are thinking," the man said finally. "Good. But knowledge alone is insufficient. Application is essential. One miscalculation can erase all previous preparation. Timing is critical. Anticipate, calculate, and execute precisely. Hours passed. Jamie remained alert, observing every shadow, every shift in the man's position, every faint sound. The loose floorboard, the crevice in the pile of debris, the angle of light from the broken window all became components in a growing mental map. Rehearsal and planning had become instinct. Each micro-movement, each habit of the man, became part of an intricate strategy that Jamie crafted silently, in preparation for the eventual opportunity to act. By mid-afternoon, the man shifted the exercise. He produced a set of small objects from the box, a coil of wire, a short leather strap, a small hammer, and a length of rope. "These are exercises in foresight," he said. "Evaluate potential uses. Consider consequences. Timing and precision are essential. Do not act hastily. Observe first, act second." Jamie catalogued each object carefully. The wire could bind or signal. The strap could secure or restrain. The hammer could leverage or distract. The rope could tether, support, or trigger. He mentally rehearsed sequences, considering outcomes, potential obstacles, and contingencies. Each object was a tool, each movement a calculation, each breath an opportunity to observe the environment for weakness. The man circled silently, pen poised. "Very good," he said. "But understanding alone is insufficient. Comprehension must guide action. Even the most perfect plan will fail if executed too soon or too late. Patience is critical." Jamie absorbed the lesson silently. Over the past days, he had begun to notice patterns, micro-distractions, fleeting moments when the man's attention shifted, the subtle rhythm of pacing and breathing. These details, previously unnoticed, were now elements in his mental blueprint for eventual action. The ember of hope, fragile yet persistent, glimmered more brightly. For the first time in weeks, he could see that opportunity, while distant, was not impossible. Evening arrived with oppressive weight. Jamie lay on the cot, muscles aching, mind alive with calculation. He traced the loose floorboard with his eyes, examined the crevice in the debris, and reviewed the angles of light from the windows. Each observation fed into an increasingly detailed plan. He rehearsed movements, sequences, and contingencies, running every scenario silently, testing outcomes, and refining timing. Fear was ever present, yet it had become a tool, focusing the mind and sharpening judgment rather than paralyzing action. Dinner was served without a word, each action deliberate and precise. Jamie noted every shift in posture, every glance, every faint movement of the man's hand. The patterns were clear now. The routines, the small lapses, the subtle distractions, all could be leveraged if executed with patience and precision. Every observation strengthened his understanding, every micro-detail a potential advantage. After dinner, the man introduced a final exercise for the day. He placed several objects on the floor, a short chain, a shard of glass, a coil of wire, and a length of twine. "These are exercises in foresight," he said. "Analyze potential applications, consider multiple outcomes, anticipate consequences. Timing, precision, and comprehension will determine your success." Jamie examined the objects carefully. The chain could be used to distract or leverage, the glass to cut or signal, the wire to bind or manipulate, the twine to tether or trigger. He rehearsed sequences silently, imagining possible uses, calculating risks, and cataloging every detail. Each rehearsal was a step toward mastery, each observation a safeguard against error. The man circled silently, pen poised. "Very good," he said finally. "Understanding tools is one thing. Understanding context is another. Anticipate, calculate, act precisely. Opportunity is fleeting. Timing is everything." Jamie absorbed the instruction, mentally integrating every observation, every pattern, every subtle movement into a growing strategic plan. The patterns, routines, and rhythms could all be exploited, if only he acted with patience, precision, and mental acuity. The ember of hope glimmered steadily, providing a sense of agency that had been absent for weeks. Night deepened. Jamie lay on the cot, eyes open, reviewing every detail before sleep. The loose floorboard, the crevice, the angles of light, and the subtle habits of the man were all catalogued, forming a silent blueprint. Every rehearsal, every observation, every mental calculation was a step toward the eventual plan of action. The psychological tension of captivity had become preparation, anticipation, and meticulous planning. Sleep eventually claimed him, but it was not surrender. It was a strategic pause. The ember of determination burned steadily, fed by observation, knowledge, and awareness. Jamie understood that survival required more than endurance. It demanded precision, patience, and calculated mental effort. Within the darkness of the room, a plan was quietly crystallizing, a blueprint for the eventual move toward freedom. The morning light crept cautiously through the narrow slits in the boarded windows, painting thin, cold lines across the dust-laden floor. Jamie awoke stiff and aching, muscles taut from another night of restless vigilance. The room smelled of damp wood and stale air, a constant reminder of his captivity. He stretched carefully, mindful not to make a sound that might draw the man's attention prematurely. Every breath, every shift of weight had become a measured act, a quiet rehearsal in control. The man was already awake, seated in his usual corner, pen in hand, notebook open. He did not speak immediately, his eyes scanning Jamie like a predator measuring movement and intent. Jamie knew these silent moments were more dangerous than any verbal exchange. One flicker of fear, one misjudged glance, and the balance of control could shift abruptly. He held his posture steady, eyes forward, mind alert, cataloging the micro-details of the man's presence, the subtle tilt of the head, the gentle flex of fingers, the rhythm of breathing. "You are learning," the man said finally, voice smooth, deliberate, carrying an edge beneath the calm. "Observation is only valuable if paired with comprehension. You must understand context, predict consequences, and act with precision. Awareness alone is insufficient. Do you comprehend?" Jamie nodded silently. He had begun to internalize the lesson, understanding that every sound, shadow, and habit was a potential piece of leverage. Over the past days, he had honed his awareness to a fine point, cataloging patterns and lapses, small cracks in the man's otherwise careful control. Each insight strengthened a mental plan forming quietly, patiently, waiting for opportunity. Breakfast arrived as usual. Bread, a thin slice of cheese, and a cup of water. Jamie ate slowly, eyes flicking toward the man's movements. He noted the pen tapping in rhythm against the notebook, the slight shift in posture, the pauses in attention. Every detail fed the growing internal map of the environment. The more he observed, the more he realized that even the man's seemingly unbreakable routines contained imperfections. Patterns existed, and patterns could be predicted. After breakfast, the man placed a small, locked box on the floor. "Inside are items you must assess without opening it," he said. "Reasoning, deduction, and patience will guide you. Observe closely, anticipate outcomes. Timing is critical." Jamie approached cautiously, examining the box. He shook it gently, listened for subtle shifts inside, examined the hinges and lock mechanism. Using the small mirror he had previously been allowed, he glimpsed the underside without touching it. Every detail was catalogued in his mind. The man circled silently, eyes never leaving him, pen poised as if recording invisible lines of thought and movement. "You are thinking," the man said finally. "Good. But thinking without correct application is wasted effort. One misstep can undo days of careful calculation. Anticipate, calculate, and execute precisely. Timing is essential." Hours passed. Jamie remained focused, studying every micro-movement, every shift in posture, every faint sound. The loose floorboard, the hidden crevice in the pile of debris, the angles of light from the windows, all were now components of a growing mental blueprint. Each observation, each rehearsal in his mind, was a step toward readiness. Patience and mental precision had become his strongest weapons. By mid-afternoon, the man produced a set of objects from the box: a coil of thin wire, a leather strap, a small hammer, and a length of rope. "These are exercises in foresight and comprehension," he said. "Evaluate their potential, consider consequences, anticipate outcomes. Precision and timing will determine success. Do not act hastily." Jamie cataloged each item meticulously. The wire could bind, signal, or manipulate. The strap could restrain or secure. The hammer could leverage, distract, or apply force. The rope could tether, support, or trigger mechanisms. Each object became a tool in his mental rehearsal, every potential use evaluated and cross-referenced against possible scenarios. Patience had become instinct, every micro-movement calculated and catalogued. The man circled silently, pen poised, eyes sharp. "Very good," he said. "Understanding tools is one thing. Understanding context is another. Even a perfect plan is meaningless without proper timing. Patience is key. Observe, anticipate, and act with precision. Opportunity is fleeting." Jamie absorbed the words silently, integrating every observation, every subtle detail of the man's movements into a coherent mental strategy. He had begun to recognize slight lapses, micro-distractions, fleeting moments when attention shifted, predictable pauses in routine. These were the moments he would one day exploit, carefully and deliberately. The ember of hope, once faint, glimmered brighter. The possibility of action was no longer theoretical, it was approaching tangibility. Evening arrived with its familiar weight. Jamie lay on the cot, eyes tracing the lines of the floor, the edges of the debris, the slivers of light through the windows. He mentally rehearsed sequences of movement, timing, and contingency. Every object, the wire, strap, hammer, rope, was considered for multiple uses, every potential outcome simulated in his mind. Fear was present, yet it had evolved into sharp awareness, a tool that heightened focus rather than constraining it. Dinner passed silently. Jamie ate deliberately, noting every gesture of the man, every shift in posture, every glance. Patterns were now unmistakable. The subtle rhythm of breathing, the brief lapses in attention, the way objects were handled with a routine precision. Every detail was a building block in a carefully constructed mental plan, a blueprint that would one day guide action. After dinner, the man introduced a final exercise for the day. Several objects were laid on the floor: a broken chain, a shard of glass, a length of wire, and a coil of twine. "These are exercises in foresight," he said. "Analyze potential applications, evaluate outcomes, anticipate consequences. Timing, precision, and comprehension will determine your success." Jamie approached the objects methodically. The chain could provide leverage or distraction, the glass could cut or signal, the wire could bind or manipulate, the twine could tether or trigger. He rehearsed sequences silently, imagining outcomes, testing contingencies, cataloging every detail. Each rehearsal was a step toward mastery, each observation a safeguard against error. The man circled silently, pen poised. "Very good," he said finally. "Understanding tools is one thing. Understanding context is another. Opportunity is rare. Timing is everything. Comprehension and patience must guide action." Jamie absorbed the lesson, integrating every observation into a growing strategic plan. The patterns, routines, and micro-behaviors of the man were now fully mapped in his mind. He understood that patience, precision, and careful execution were essential for survival and eventual action. The ember of hope, once fragile, glimmered steadily, providing a sense of control that had been absent for weeks. Night deepened. Jamie lay on the cot, eyes open, reviewing every detail once more. The loose floorboard, the crevice in the debris, the angles of light, and the subtle habits of the man were all carefully catalogued, forming a mental blueprint. Rehearsals in his mind became increasingly complex, integrating contingencies and testing outcomes. The tension of captivity had been transformed into preparation, anticipation, and meticulous planning. Sleep claimed him eventually, but not as surrender. It was a strategic pause, a moment to consolidate knowledge and rehearsals to rest the body while the mind continued to refine strategy. The ember of determination burned steadily, sharpened by observation, analysis, and awareness. Jamie knew that freedom would not come from endurance alone, but from patience, precise calculation, and mental acuity. Within the darkness of the room, a plan was quietly solidifying, a blueprint for eventual action, a path toward reclaiming life beyond the shadows. The following morning arrived with a gray, oppressive light filtering through the boarded windows, casting thin, cold shadows across the small room. Jamie woke stiff, every muscle aching from yet another night of anxious vigilance, yet his mind was alive with anticipation. Sleep had become fragmented, an occasional respite rather than complete rest, but it was enough to maintain the clarity of his mental rehearsals. Every sound, every shadow, every subtle shift of air was catalogued and analyzed. Awareness had become instinct, and instinct now guided every movement. The man was already awake, seated in his usual corner, notebook open, pen poised. His gaze swept the room, landing on Jamie with a piercing intensity that made the boy's stomach tighten. These silent mornings were more threatening than any verbal command. One misstep could invite immediate consequences. Jamie held still, breathing slowly, carefully, ensuring that every motion suggested attentiveness and composure. He knew that the man was recording more than actions. He was reading intention, measuring hesitation, cataloging micro-expressions. "You are becoming precise," the man said at last, voice calm but edged with authority. "Observation alone is insufficient. Comprehension and anticipation must follow. Action without planning is folly. Do you understand?" Jamie nodded silently, swallowing hard. Words would have betrayed his inner calculations. He had learned to internalize, to observe, to rehearse, and to prepare. Over the past days, he had mapped every nuance of the man's behavior, habitual pauses, the rhythm of his writing, micro-shifts in posture, moments of distraction, the angles of light and shadow, all of it stored as potential leverage. Each detail could form a piece of the plan he had been quietly constructing in his mind. Breakfast arrived with its usual simplicity: bread, a thin slice of cheese, and a small cup of water. Jamie ate slowly, eyes flicking toward the man, noting every gesture, every breath, every subtle twitch of hand or pen. The tap of the notebook against the corner, the tilt of the head, the small inhale before writing. All of it was observation material, catalogued, rehearsed, analyzed. The mental map of the room, the objects, the man's habits, and the timing of his movements was becoming more intricate, more precise. After breakfast, the man presented a new task. A small, locked wooden box was placed before Jamie. "Inside are items you must assess without opening it," he said. "Reasoning, deduction, and patience are your tools. Observation is necessary, but comprehension must guide application. Timing is critical." Jamie approached carefully, shaking the box gently, listening to the faint sounds inside, examining hinges and edges. Using a small mirror he had been allowed, he viewed the underside without touching it directly. Each subtle sound, each variation in weight, each imperfection was catalogued. The man circled silently, pen poised, watching every micro-movement, evaluating intention. "You are thinking," the man said at last. "Good, but knowledge without precision is useless. One error can undo all prior preparation. Anticipate, calculate, execute deliberately. Timing is essential." Hours passed. Jamie remained still, observing, absorbing every detail. The loose floorboard, the hidden crevice, the angles of light through the window, the sound of air moving across the room. Each element became a potential opportunity, a piece of a growing strategic map. Every rehearsal in his mind was an exercise in precision, testing outcomes, considering contingencies. Fear had transformed into focus, sharpening awareness, refining judgment. By mid-afternoon, the man produced several objects from the box: a coil of thin wire, a leather strap, a small hammer, and a length of rope. "These are exercises in foresight," he said. "Evaluate potential uses, anticipate outcomes, consider consequences. Timing and precision are essential. Do not act hastily. Observation first, action second." Jamie examined each object meticulously. The wire could bind, signal, or manipulate. The strap could secure, restrain, or act as a trigger. The hammer could distract, leverage, or apply force. The rope could tether, support, or restrain. Every potential use was rehearsed silently, mental sequences meticulously tested for success and failure. Each object became part of an intricate plan, each possible application mapped against scenarios and contingencies. The man circled silently, pen poised. "Very good," he said. "Understanding tools is one thing. Understanding context is another. Even a flawless plan fails without correct timing. Opportunity is fleeting. Precision and patience must guide action." Jamie absorbed the lesson quietly, mentally integrating every observation, every subtle movement, every shift in routine into a comprehensive, strategic map. He noticed micro-distractions, fleeting lapses in the man's attention, the rhythm of pacing, the predictable moments of inattention. These minor imperfections were the cracks through which he would one day act, the openings that patience and observation had revealed. The ember of hope, once tentative, now burned steadily, providing clarity and a growing sense of agency. Evening arrived, bringing the familiar tension. Jamie lay on the cot, muscles aching, mind alive with strategy and rehearsal. He traced the floorboard, re-examined the crevice, and reviewed the angles of light. Each detail was considered in the context of potential action, each rehearsal silently executed in mental simulation. Fear remained, but it was sharpened into precision, focusing the mind on the possible rather than the impossible. Dinner passed without word, each movement deliberate. Jamie observed every subtle shift in posture, every glance, every flick of the hand. The patterns were clear: micro-lapses in attention, predictable routines, subtle cues indicating distraction. Every observation strengthened the mental blueprint, each minor detail a potential advantage to exploit. Rehearsals in his mind grew increasingly sophisticated, integrating objects, sequences, timing, and contingencies into a single coherent plan. After dinner, the man presented a final exercise for the day. Several small objects were laid on the floor: a broken chain, a shard of glass, a coil of wire, and a length of twine. "These are exercises in foresight," he said. "Analyze potential applications. Consider outcomes. Timing, precision, and comprehension will determine success." Jamie examined the items carefully, rehearsing multiple scenarios silently. The chain could provide distraction or leverage. The glass could cut or signal. The wire could bind or manipulate. The twine could tether or trigger. Each rehearsal, each imagined outcome was catalogued and refined. Patience, calculation, and mental acuity had become second nature. Every detail was a tool, every observation a safeguard. The man circled silently, pen poised. "Very good," he said. "Understanding tools is one thing. Understanding context is another. Opportunity is rare. Timing is everything. Comprehension and patience must guide action." Jamie absorbed the instruction, integrating every observation into a growing, intricate mental blueprint. The patterns, routines, and micro-behaviors of the man were now fully mapped. Patience, precision, and careful execution would determine whether he could act successfully. The ember of hope, once fragile, now glimmered steadily, providing a sense of control that had been absent for weeks. Night deepened. Jamie lay on the cot, eyes open, reviewing every detail once more. The loose floorboard, the crevice, The angles of light and the subtle habits of the man were catalogued, forming a detailed mental map. Rehearsals in his mind became more complex, integrating contingencies and multiple outcomes. The tension of captivity had transformed into preparation and anticipation. Every action had a purpose, every detail mattered, every second could be leveraged. Sleep eventually claimed him, but it was not surrender. It was a strategic pause, a moment to consolidate knowledge, refine rehearsals, and rest the body while the mind continued to sharpen strategy. The ember of determination burned steadily, fueled by observation, awareness, and calculated patience. Jamie understood that survival required more than endurance. It demanded precision, patience, and an unwavering focus on opportunity. Within the darkness of the room, a plan was quietly solidifying, a blueprint for action, a path toward freedom beyond the shadows. Morning broke with a muted gray light, seeping through the cracks in the boarded windows. Jamie awoke with a heightened awareness, every muscle tense, every sense sharpened. The room felt smaller than ever, yet within it he felt an ember of control igniting, a silent understanding that the moment of opportunity might finally arrive. Nights of rehearsal, observation, and careful calculation had brought him to this point. The man, unaware of the depth of Jamie's preparation, moved through his morning routine with the same meticulous precision, entirely predictable to the boy. Jamie lay still, noting the rhythm of the man's breathing, the pattern of his movements, the subtle micro-expressions that had become familiar over days of captivity. He catalogued each detail mentally, ensuring every step was rehearsed, every contingency considered. The loose floorboard, the crevice in the debris, the angles of light through the windows, all were carefully memorized. Each object in the room had been studied for potential application: the coil of wire, the strap, the hammer, the rope, even the shard of glass and the broken chain. Every item had been mentally assigned a role, every scenario tested silently in rehearsal. The man's gaze finally fell on him, piercing, assessing. "You are ready," he said, his voice smooth, deliberate, carrying the familiar edge of authority. "Observation and comprehension are progressing, but readiness without execution is meaningless. Do you understand?" Jamie nodded silently, forcing himself to appear passive while his mind raced. Execution would not be reckless. It would be precise, calculated, timed to the exact micro-moment when the man's routine presented the smallest window. For weeks he had waited, studied, and prepared. Today, that preparation would be put to the ultimate test. Breakfast arrived: bread, a thin slice of cheese, a small cup of water. Jamie ate deliberately, every bite measured, every movement controlled. The man circled, notebook in hand, recording and analyzing, unaware that each predictable step had been memorized. He noted the pen tapping, the tilt of the head, the subtle inhale before each note, details Jamie had catalogued in the vast, intricate map forming silently in his mind. After breakfast, the man placed a small box in front of him, locked, with the usual cryptic instructions. "Assessment without direct manipulation is key," he said. "Reasoning, deduction, and foresight must guide you. Timing is essential." Jamie approached carefully, his fingers brushing the edges but never forcing contact. He shook the box lightly, listened for sound, inspected hinges and lock with practiced eyes. The small mirror allowed him to see the underside. Every detail, every imperfection, every micro-clue was catalogued and mentally integrated into the broader plan. The man circled silently, unaware that Jamie's observation had now reached its apex. He understood the environment, the objects, and the predator fully. "You are thinking," the man said at last. "Good, but knowledge without precise application is wasted. One error can undo all prior preparation. Anticipate, calculate, and execute deliberately." Jamie absorbed the words, his mind racing through rehearsals. Today would be different. Today, patience and precision would intersect with opportunity. For weeks he had studied, catalogued, and mentally tested sequences, refining timing down to fractions of a second. Now, all those rehearsals would converge into one moment of decisive action. Hours passed, and the man grew absorbed in his own routine, moving between objects, checking notes, adjusting items on the floor with meticulous care. Jamie observed silently, every breath controlled, every movement minimal. He traced the loose floorboard with his eyes, visualized the crevice in the debris, confirmed angles of light from the windows. Every detail was accounted for, every rehearsal rehearsed. The man produced a small collection of objects: coil of wire, strap, hammer, rope. "Exercises in foresight," he said. "Evaluate potential applications. Anticipate outcomes. Timing and precision are essential. Do not act hastily." Jamie catalogued each item, mentally assigning roles. The wire could bind or manipulate, the strap could restrain, the hammer distract, the rope secure. Every possible application had been rehearsed silently, contingencies tested, outcomes calculated. The object itself became a component in an intricate mental map. Evening approached, and the man became absorbed in minor tasks, oblivious to the alignment of circumstances that Jamie had been anticipating. Every micro-lapse, every moment of inattention became a trigger for action. His opportunity had arrived. Jamie moved first, silently, deliberately. He shifted weight without noise, moving toward the loose floorboard he had studied meticulously. Hands, steady despite adrenaline, lifted the board, revealing the hidden cavity beneath. He retrieved the rope he had carefully planned to use, coiling it in his mind to ensure maximum efficiency. Every movement was rehearsed, every fraction of time calculated. The man noticed a subtle shift, a micro-change in posture. He glanced up, pen momentarily frozen in mid-air. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice sharp but caught off guard. Jamie did not hesitate. Precision, rehearsal, and preparation guided his every step. He moved with fluidity, leveraging the man's brief distraction, using the hammer to create a small diversion with a controlled, muted impact on the floor. The man's gaze shifted instinctively to the noise, and Jamie seized the microsecond window. The coil of wire was used to secure the door handle silently, ensuring no sudden escape or interference. Every micro-action executed with exacting precision. The man turned fully, eyes narrowing, pen lowered, sensing the shift in control. Jamie was already positioned, his movements smooth, rehearsed, precise. The rope found its place around a stable anchor in the room, providing leverage for restraint if necessary. He was no longer the passive observer. He had become the executor of his own plan. Tension filled the air, thick and suffocating, as the man lunged reflexively. Jamie sidestepped with calculated speed, using the leverage from the rope to unbalance him. The hammer, previously secured, became a tool of minor control, enough to maintain distance without unnecessary harm. Each micro-movement, each fraction of a second, had been anticipated and rehearsed, the culmination of weeks of silent observation and patient preparation. The man regained his footing, eyes wide, recognizing the shift in power. "Impressive," he said sharply, a mix of admiration and frustration in his voice. "But precision without consequence is meaningless. What will you do now?" Jamie did not answer. His focus remained on execution, on timing, on completing the sequence flawlessly. He moved with fluid confidence, using the rope to secure the man's hands, calculated enough to prevent injury, yet effective enough to neutralize resistance. The man struggled, momentarily caught, and Jamie used the small diversion created earlier to shift leverage, ensuring control. Seconds stretched, tension breaking in increments as the room became a field of silent, precise actions. Jamie's awareness was absolute, every micro-detail exploited, every contingency covered. He had transformed from captive to orchestrator, the culmination of careful observation, meticulous rehearsal, and mental precision. Every fear, every anxiety of the past days had crystallized into this single, controlled moment. Finally, the man was restrained sufficiently, a begrudging recognition of defeat in his eyes. Jamie stepped back, breathing controlled, awareness still fully alert. The room, once oppressive, now felt different, charged with possibility, potential, and the nascent scent of freedom. Jamie allowed himself a brief pause, scanning every angle, every shadow, every object one last time. The rehearsals, the observations, the patient calculations had paid off. The ember of hope that had burned faintly for days now glimmered brightly, illuminating the path forward. He had seized control without unnecessary harm, relying entirely on strategy, observation, and precision. The night outside deepened, silent and still. Jamie, though exhausted, felt a clarity he had not known since the first day of captivity. The blueprint of observation and rehearsal had led to decisive action, demonstrating the power of patience, awareness, and precise timing. The man, restrained and unable to respond, had become a testament to the effectiveness of methodical planning and unwavering mental focus. For the first time in weeks, Jamie felt a fragile but undeniable sense of agency. The room, once a prison, had been transformed into a stage where intellect, strategy, and patience triumphed over fear, control, and oppression. Every detail, every micro-behavior, every rehearsal had contributed to this moment. Every second of waiting, every fraction of observation had been necessary, culminating in this decisive, silent victory. As the night deepened further, Jamie settled briefly on the cot, muscles aching but mind alive, cataloging every aspect of what had transpired. The journey from captive to orchestrator had been a testament to resilience, patience, and precision. The ember of hope, now a steady flame, illuminated not only the immediate triumph, but the broader understanding that intelligence, awareness, and calculated courage could overcome even the most oppressive circumstances.